All right, we are back with another fine episode of Natural AF. I'm your host, Isaac.
And I'm Alexa. And this show is for you if you are down for exploring what it means to be natural AF. And as we found on our 47th episode of Natural AF, it's a very, very deep exploration. And we go from natural health alternatives to spirituality, to healing modalities, to how to grow your own food and just living the natural AF way.
There's a lot of synthetic artifices out there. And this is our journey, sharing it with you, of doing away with all that, replacing the synthetic with the natural, replacing the artificial with the real. And we're just so pumped that you're here to join us for this journey.
Yeah, so this episode is, if you had told me I was going to do a whole 3-hour podcast episode on the Bible even a year ago, I would have been like, nah.
She would have been like,
no way.
Nerd.
Nah, yeah, I would have been like, nah, we're not doing that. But no, we really wanted to present this topic because Isaac and I, which, you know, we talk about throughout this episode, and with little bits and pieces, we have very different upbringings when it comes to spirituality, religion, all of that. And we've come to this place where we've explored very different realms of spirituality and what it means to be spiritual. And for me, this has been a huge turning point of actually coming back to the Bible and learning the Bible. I never really grew up learning the Bible. Isaac's quite well versed in that area. And it's interesting because my brother was very drawn as a young boy to learning the Bible and learning about Jesus. And I never really was. And yeah, I found this particular interview with Nick and Dotti actually quite transformative. It's actually really wild what happened in the recording of this interview. At around an hour 11, an hour 12 minutes in, funny that it was 111, I actually think it was. But so in about an hour from here, an hour and 10 minutes from this point, you might actually see me if you're watching this on camera. I actually really started tearing up and I actually thought I was about to burst into tears. Because as Nick and Dotti were speaking about the stories of Jesus and what Jesus was all about and why he came here, I actually had this experience of him. And it was my first experience ever, personal experience with Jesus or of Jesus, where I just pictured him quite often as people are telling stories, you'll get a kind of a picture in your mind. But in this kind of vision that I had, he looked right at me and I just felt this overwhelming feeling of unconditional love. It was, I'm getting cold shivers as I'm just saying it now. It was incredible. And not something I ever thought would happen, especially in the middle of a podcast recording. And I kind of didn't know what to do with it. And we spoke about it off camera and Nick and Dotti both said, you should really share that. And I was like, yeah, I definitely will share it in the intro. And yeah, for anyone watching, you might actually see my face change or I didn't know what to do. But it was really beautiful. And for the first time after we recorded, I've picked up my Bible and I'm starting to read it and learn the teachings. And you know, like we spoke about in this episode, it's so important to use discernment, but just to be really open to the truth. And I think that's what I'm stepping into this new realm with.
Yeah, that's really special and amazing. And there's I grew up hearing other stories like that. My family's has a colored past, and there's been lots of ups and downs, but I've just heard stories of people having very profound experiences that have brought them to the realization that there is a there with the spiritual side and the truth side of the religion that I largely don't agree with any of these religions, with the way that, the people in them act, the way that people behave, the way that, there's a reason why it's off-putting. Some people get, this creepy crawly, repelling feeling when Jesus' name is brought up. And there's been a lot of fighting and there's been a lot of just nonsense, unnecessary stuff. But maybe it's not all unnecessary, all the stuff, because we're all trying to figure out what is here, what's the truth.
Yeah, and just to preface this, if you're anything like I was a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, and you're just oh, Bible or whatever, I just really listened to this with an open mind, because the intention behind this roundtable was to come at it from a non-religious standpoint And it's not about the dogma that's in the Bible. And because, obviously, like what Isaac is speaking to now is that a lot of these religions have taken a lot of the stories in the Bible. What I find with a lot of them is that they actually take the stories in the Bible, but then they take their interpretations and create this dogma around it, around things that literally weren't even said in the Bible, or things that Jesus didn't even say himself. So and then I implore people to then go and do your own quote unquote research. Because I mean by research, like read the Bible, but also listen to other people, how other people interpret the stories. And that's what I love about Nick and Dotti and the way that their perspective on some of the stories and how they speak about it. And we got a really good balance with both of them too, I find, because Nick like really knows, like he knows the Bible inside and out. Like he's literally studied it. And so does Dotti, but Dottie's in a different, she's a little more abstract. And I love Dottie's message always comes back to like, we all have access to this. We all have access to God and we can experience God. And I think that, learning the stories in the Bible and really looking at what Jesus came here to do. I've kind of I'm only just starting to figure this stuff out. I really feel that Jesus was sent here to show us what's possible and how powerful we truly are. And I think we're only just starting to unravel that now in this current time period that we're in.
Yeah. I hope you're open to exploring this topic with us. We're trying to explore this from a just open, honest standpoint. If you look at the entire Western civilization, it was shaped in a large part around these ideas. And so we're cracking into what's really there. What is our place in this world going to be going forward? Because we're here, we're focused on building the new, growing our families, growing our communities, growing a business, all of that on a firm foundation of truth. Everything's been covered over in some form of lie in almost every direction for most of your lives. If you really go back down to it, there's a lot of deception going on. So
there's so much gravy in this episode, guys. Like, buckle up. Buckle up. And for anyone that doesn't know Nick and Dotti already, if you're regular listeners to this show, you will be familiar with them. We had Nick Patterson on very recently on episode 43, and we had Dotti on a little while ago on episode 32, where we actually explored, that episode is called Religion versus Spirituality. So we kind of, it was a bit of an introduction to sort of this. We went a lot deeper in this roundtable, but we did speak about this with Dotti in that episode. So if you haven't listened to them, highly recommend going back. Nick's got an amazing story and he shares a little bit of his wisdom there as well. But we really go deep into this one. And both Nick and Dotti are going to be speaking at the Living Free Festival this year in August. We're both going to be attending. Isaac's going to be emceeing. I'm presenting a workshop. We're going to have our natural art form stall there. It's going to be an amazing weekend. So if you'd like to come along, you can get discounted tickets using our code NaturalAF. The links will be in the show notes. Head to our link tree and there'll be a link to the site with our discount code.
And in the States, Refresh deodorant is live for the first time since the Bear Fest, the second Bear Fest that I went to.
It was called Wonder Down Under then, remember?
Yeah, it was Wonder Down Under. I've gone over the formula and refined it since then. We've got 2 scents, Refresh Calm, which is lavender, hoe wood or rosewood, and lemongrass. And that's a really nice, I think it's kind of a unisex. It's not too flowery. It's a bit brighter.
Beautiful scent combo, that one.
Really, really effective natural underarm deodorant that's antioxidant rich, magnesium rich, no bicarb. And the other scent is Forest, which is cedarwood, black spruce, a little bit of turpentine to help keep that underarm fresh and benefit the lymphatic system, keep it clean, and a little turmeric oil in there now. So really, really beneficial for your health, not just non-poisoning.
So for the Americans out there, of course, we have an amazing introductory offer so that you can try out both scents.
Killer deal. Buy one, get one 50% off. Throw it in your gym bag, keep it in your car, go camping. It goes great with an active, healthy lifestyle that we know all of you value. Everyone's telling us it's the best natural deodorant they've ever used. It's innovative. It's new. No one else is doing it like us.
When you buy one, you'll get the second one at 50% off using the code LAUNCH50 at checkout. But this is only available to the first 50 customers. And that's the first 50 customers worldwide, whether you're in the US, Australia, anywhere else in the world. but there is a limited amount. So head to naturalartform.com where you can nab that. And if you haven't already, join our mailing list. That's where we always drop our latest updates, our new launches. You'll get them there first. So sign up to the mailing list and make sure you don't miss out on our best deals.
So just before we get into the episode, we just want to let you know at the very end, Dotti's audio and video cut out, but you don't really miss a whole lot. She said everything she needed to say during the episode. Other than that one little glitch at the end, the episode was really, really great. Thanks, everybody. Let's get into the episode. Welcome back to the show, Nick and Dotti. It's been not too long since we've had both of y'all on, but we're excited for this first roundtable with you two. And we're going to talk about some spiritual topics and some getting into a little bit of religion, like maybe where we all came from and where we are now, and maybe where we see things going in the future. We'll see what other questions and topics Alexa has lined up as well.
Yeah, I'm deeming this episode Bible Study 2.0 because we're going next level with this one. So, Dotti, maybe let's open it up with you because we had you on much earlier this year. Just a little bit of your background. So your sort of background your episode that you did with us was called Religion versus Spirituality. So we already dived right into this. But for anyone new listening that doesn't know you, just a little bit of your background with religion, Christianity, and why you know the Bible so well.
Okay, so that's a big question, actually. And it's like, where do you start? So just briefly, always been very God aware as a child and, was introduced into the Catholic Church like most of us. And at the age of 7, I basically turned around to my mum and just went, if I have to go through a priest to speak to God, God's not worth talking to. And, she hit the deck going, oh, my gosh, demon-possessed child.
Demon child, yeah.
Yeah. And it was it was a truth, really. And I, just did life. And then at the age of 23, I very simply just, I had heard about God, I'd heard about Jesus, all that sort of thing. But it was just a simple transaction in the sense that I just asked God to come into my life. And I had a supernatural experience. It was like, my eyes were opened, my heart was open, my ears were opened, and I just could see into the spirit realm. And I saw both good and evil. And the one thing that really sat with me was who I was in God at that moment. It was absolutely transfigurational. It was transformational. I was literally one person 1 minute and the next minute a completely different person. And, with that came the hunger for the spiritual things, but also understanding who God is. And that brings in the Bible aspect because that's where we go to find out who God is, and have had many encounters with certain scriptures that have been my truth. They've been my foundation, and I've lived from those for the last 45 years. So that's where my Bible knowledge has come from, because I was hungry to understand God and who I was in God and what that meant, for the purpose of while I was here on the earth, what I carry in my relationship with God, and the truth of that. And everything I share comes from my own personal experiences. It's not from something that I've read or heard someone else do. So that's my foundation. I only share what I've experienced.
Yeah,
Amazing.
great. Thank you.
And give us a bit of your background, Nick.
So what do you want to hear? Just how I came to
well,
because
you've kind of always grown up with you've always been a Christian, haven't you, your whole life, and your family's like that?
Not exactly. No.
Okay.
No. So I grew up with my mother, and we lived in a very, very humble abode in commission flats in South Melbourne. And my mother, who had all sorts of issues in her life, and I won't go into that. Yeah, but there was all sorts of issues that she had. She always taught me to pray to God. And we never went to church. I didn't go to any church until I was 14, and it wasn't with my mother. It was with somebody that I met preaching in the street, and I just wanted to go to the church with them. So that was my introduction to church. I didn't know anything else except for praying and what I'd learned at religious instruction classes at school, which we used to have back in the day. Just in public school, you would get religious instruction. It was my favorite class. Now they don't have those in the public schools anymore, which is really, really sad. And I'm grateful that I was able to to get a bit of an understanding of who God was, at least a base level understanding. But anyway, my mother always taught me to pray as early as I can remember, so I just did. And I think that was the beginning of my walk. But it wasn't until I was about 17 that I was trying to really focus on God. I was thinking about the things that I knew about God. I didn't have a great knowledge of the Bible. And every time I'd sit down in my room just to think about God, to think about Jesus, because I'd be thinking about Jesus, what he did, why he did it, what we'd call, from the biblical perspective, meditating on the word, right? So you think about those concepts and you ponder them, you think about them in your head. And I kept having these destructive thoughts jump into my mind again and again and again. So I had a prayer about it, and I asked God to help me to have clear thoughts about Jesus. And literally in that moment, this loud noise, like a rushing wind, came from above my head, and it was so powerful that it was actually terrifying, because it wasn't like a horror movie terrifying. It was just the sheer power of it. And because I was sitting on my bed and I wasn't asleep, I was wide awake, and I had this prayer: please help me to be able to concentrate on Jesus and have clear thoughts. And I had this discussion. As soon as I finished my prayer, I hear this noise, and then this wind comes down and it pushes me into the bed with such force that I'm all tense. And then I just realized, no, this is God. No, I've never experienced anything like this. So I let it go, and it was like wind that went right through me. It didn't just hit my skin; it went right through me. And then once it had gone, it was kind of like I was in sort of shock. I couldn't even tee a sentence together properly. I was like, "Whoa, what just happened? What just happened?" That was God. And because I'd prayed about Jesus specifically, that's how I knew, this is it. Now, I already believed in Jesus. I already believed in the Bible. I didn't have a great knowledge of the Bible, but I already believed because I'd been praying and something had drawn me that way. And there's a Bible verse where it says, where Jesus himself says, "No man comes to me save the Father first draws him." So there was something drawing me that way as a child. And I've seen it with other children that are, like I've got friends and their children seem to be drawn that way as well. And like the mums and dads are like, we don't know where he's getting this because, or she's getting this because we're not teaching them this stuff. But the point is, I from that point onward, it wasn't a belief anymore. It was like, oh, I know, like God's like right there. And then from then on, I started to get more and more focused on who is God. And it's interesting because when I had that experience, I didn't know what to make of it. I had no idea. I didn't know about. There's actually in the book of Acts, you've got this thing called the Day of Pentecost, where this wind comes down as the Holy Spirit. I hadn't even read that in the Bible yet, so I rang up a friend and he told me about that, and I said that just happened to me, but it was a bit different because it seemed to be more mild, and they had some other things happen in that interaction. But when it happened to me, it was just this real big shock, almost like a punch. And it was overwhelming. It was terrifying, but terrifying in the way that you would think that you realize the power of God. So straight away, my faith level went right up. I'm like, God's right there. I just had a prayer, and literally, He came with power. I can't doubt anymore. There's no place for doubt, and that was the beginning of my solid walk with God.
And then from there on, was that? Did that lead you to like more personal study, or did you ever go through like a seminary or like any formal education on it, or?
Years later, so I was a pro fighter. When I retired from fighting, I did 3 years part-time, just online study through a university in Israel, and I learned a couple of different languages, and I learned how to. I did, various different courses that equated to like a diploma. It wasn't anything really significant, but that's what I did.
Was it about learning Hebrew?
I was just running my gym, and it was like my part-time sort of study at the time. Yeah. So that's all I've done as far as study, and the rest of it's just been at home reading the Bible, and that's been the one book that I've been very diligent and tenacious with.
Did you learn Hebrew through that, or was that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I wonder if that's the same program that I started learning it, because I have a thing for languages. I like learning languages. Yeah. And I was like, I learned Hebrew or some company like that in Israel.
No, it wasn't that one. It wasn't. There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah.
It was the Israeli Institute of Biblical Studies.
Okay.
Interesting. And also for anyone listening that hasn't listened to our previous episode with Dotti also held pastoral positions in certain churches as well. And Nick, I know that you kind of are in leadership roles now too with teaching people this stuff. So I think that's important to note. And before we dive into, I just want to get both of your opinions, because I think I asked you this off air last time, Nick, is what version of the Bible do you guys read and recommend to people? Because there's so many different versions, and Old Testament, New Testament. What's your preference?
Well, I should pass over to Dotti first, because it's your turn to speak, Dotti. Sorry. Just jumped in there.
All right. Well, I always had, from the age of 23, I was introduced to the American Study Bible, and that was great because it broke down different word meanings, which I'm all about, because often we just read one word, but it's going into the depth of each word that opens it up more, and gives a deeper explanation. And then recently, the last 10 years, there's been a Bible version that came out, which is called the Passion. And it actually has translated from the original Aramaic wording, and it just takes, the insight into who God is into a whole different level. It really presents God as, much more relatable and very intimate and very passionate and caring. So I do recommend that Bible if people want to start reading one, because it brings the intimacy of how much God loves us, and it breaks it down. So it's not this hard, King James, because King James is translated by King James himself. So it really does open it up to other levels. And then I also have other resources like there's a concordance that will translate, Greek and Hebrew, which again opens up the words more, so that it gives you deeper understanding of what's just written in a one level. And that's not just the Bible. Like when you do that with lots of words, it opens it up that much more, because I feel that there's multiple levels to Scripture. It's like each Scripture can potentially be a portal to having experiences in the Spirit, and a revelation that's revealed to you. So a bit like what Nick was saying about Pentecost. And it's interesting in Acts, when Pentecost happened, it was tongues of fire, which is where we get the light language, or speaking in tongues, is what happened on that day. And that just takes you to another depth of, connection again into the relationship with God, and bringing understanding and insight into how God works with us and through us.
Beautiful. And you, Nick, what do you recommend? What do you read?
Yeah, I learned and memorized so many Bible verses from the King James Version, and there's a modern or a new King James Version called the KJVER, and I really like that one. But I use the Strong's Interlinear as well. So an interlinear Bible, so I can just check on the original words. But I think when you've studied the Bible for a long time and you've read and you understand where maybe the mistakes are, and part of it is that language has been debased. So if you think about a word just conveys an idea or a concept. Now, if they've changed the definition of that idea of concept or that concept over, let's say, a couple of hundred years ago, they changed and expanded a definition, and now that particular word means something different. Well, then it changes the meaning, right? So, so I don't really think there's much wrong. I know lots of people have issues with the King James Bible. I find it to be a pretty solid and pretty decent Bible. There's a few things that I think aren't correct, but it's pretty close. And you can look at the manuscripts that they used to translate from. So you can actually see what they originally used to translate from, because they used all these ancient manuscripts. So there's that. And I guess the idea, like I'll give you an example. The word church, right? We think of, if I said the word church to you, Isaac, what idea does that convey in your mind?
Well, two things. So knowing the scripture, I understand the body of Christ, like the church, is the people. But then there's also what I grew up with was church. You go to church and it's like the building. Yeah.
So you go to a religious institution or that has a clergy laity system, or people think of it as a building, right? The word church. But what it really means, if you go back to the original words like ecclesia, kahila, kahal, it just means the assembly of people. And the same word is used in the negative as well, right? So an assembly of bad people, it's the same word. It's just an assembly of people coming together. So that's what church really means. But then they've debased the meanings of these words. And now when we like, people would read the Bible, especially like an older translation, they're going to read that word church, and the context in their mind is going to be something to the effect of the religious institution, where you have the priests and all these, but it's not really that. It's not really that. What it is, it's the community of people, real people who are God's people, and truly there is only one church, and a lot of the people that are part of that church aren't even in the churches, the official churches today. So that's the point. Like, well, if we understand the original language, we can understand the concepts, and it's worth putting some effort in there with the Bible, because if you want to have a strong foundation, you want to be built on that rock, that solid, firm foundation. You got to be built on the truth, and that's what the Bible presents. It's solid truth, and it's directly from God. So I guess that's what I think of when I think of reading the Bible. Not so much about which version I think about. Like, I think there's going to be a good version, but I think it's more about understanding what those original words were and the concepts, because we're reading something that was originally written thousands of years ago. So language has changed, morphed. It's been translated through different languages. But we have some great Bibles now, and there's really good Bible apps. I use the eSword app, where you can download pretty much any Bible, and you can have it on the app.
Oh, wow.
And then you can look up the interlinear, so you can just look up whatever what the original words were, and you can just look up a particular word and just see every place where that word cited in the Bible. So it's a really amazing way to get an understanding of the depth of the Bible without having to spend, your whole life in a monastery somewhere to try and understand those deeper layers.
Yeah. And I think, you both make such good points, because I think that's a big, what I see as the biggest issue with the Bible is, apart from all of there's been a lot of manipulation. There's so many different versions of the Bible. I wish I actually got the numbers on that, but there's like so many different versions of the Bible and so many different branches of Christian religion. And I think that's where things kind of tend to get a bit warped and a bit misconstrued. And then, of course, we've had books that have been taken out. I still always say we still don't know what else has been taken out that we're not aware of. I know the book of Enoch is one that's sort of resurfaced.
Enoch, Jasher, Jubilees.
Yeah.
There's a
First
few of them.
And second Maccabees as well.
The Maccabees.
There's so many. So that's, I always think, well, what else has been taken out that we don't know about? But I think, understanding the language. And that's why I love actually both of your perspectives, and even Isaac's perspective, because he grew up within Christianity, but also he takes a look at all these other different perspectives. And I think that is so important. It's like you can't just go to one thing and then that's it. It's all the truth in that. It's like getting all these different perspectives.
Well, I've got a couple of okay, so I want to get into some interesting questions, but first I want to just, for the listener, the reason we're talking about this, like, I'm not, super Bible guy. I used to be very I used to actually wear like a big cross, and like when I was like 7 years old, I would read the Bible at school and just loved it and just had this passion for it. But I've always been a bit off road. I read things and I would pray and talk to God because it was real. And I've definitely gotten down a rough road. Like, I've made plenty of mistakes. I'm not I'm not like a very like straight edge kind of person, like coming from where all the mistakes I made, but I know there's truth and there's power in it. And the truth about what this realm is, who we are in it, that's exactly tied into this whole show, Natural AF. What is this place really? What is the underlying basis for truth and morality? Because that governs how we treat each other and how we set up rules as a society. And it's always governed that. That's part of why government is called government. And I believe now we actually need government, which is governing the mind. We need a system of rules and orders for people to have boundaries, because the erosion of boundaries is where we're at now, where we're starting to get all the trans stuff, and they're doing things to kids that are, unacceptable. And part of the population is in support of that, or doesn't care, or has no boundaries, no ability to say, no, this is a line, no further. And the Christianity that I knew has some glaring faults, some flaws, and part of it's being eroded away with this kind of new wave, like new age spirituality meshed with Christianity. So I'm trying to find that footing, like, what is the actual bedrock here, in spite of the flaws of the Catholic Church, of the church that I grew up with, and all the scandals and with pastors and all this stuff. Where do we actually find that truth? How do we get to that? And what is a distraction, and there's so much here we could go into for like weeks and weeks and weeks. We could study this, but I have like a couple of hardball questions where I'm like, people I've asked haven't really been able to answer it. So I'm just curious, for example, how do we know who wrote the New Testament, and why is Paul, who I don't fully trust, I like a lot of stuff he wrote, why did he write most of the New Testament when you don't hear much from Peter? You've got one or two books from John. Like, where are all the other apostles, and how do we know who wrote some of these? Because I've heard like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John weren't actually written by Matthew, Mark, Luke, well, except for Luke, who was an acolyte of Paul. But if that's clear as mud, take a shot. Whatever popped out to you is something you want to respond to.
Here you go, Dotti.
Oh my gosh, what a can of worms you're going to open
I was
there.
just going to say.
That is just humongous. And not only that, it's like there's a lot of speculation that, is around that conversation as well. Mm-hmm. And look, for me, to be honest, at the end of the day, it's like it's more what you get out of it. It's like how it speaks to you, the truth that's been written in there. And like you've just said before, there's a lot of speculation, but also, who wrote what, and some of it's not correct, as even Nick has, just said too. But it's to me, it's like what speaks to you, what truth comes out of it for you. Like you can read a quote that is being written by someone that might have been, in jail, but there can be life still on it, and it speaks to you, it resonates to you. So to me, it's about the frequency and the energy and the presence of God that's on a scripture that is bringing spiritual truth is what's more important than who actually wrote it. I mean, Paul was a Roman. He was also a lawyer. So there is speculation that he was set up by the government to help navigate the people into, being submitted to the government. So there's so much there. And for me, I don't get into that nitty gritty because it's like, well, there's areas that speak to me. There's areas of truth. There's spiritual laws in there. There's spiritual truth that resonates with my spirit. So that's what I take as truth. And there's definitely a lot in the Bible that is truth. But you've also got, different opinions. It's a bit like two kids can be brought up in one household and they both experience a similar event, but they both respond and react to it differently. And they see it differently. So that's really a part of the element that's involved with that. What do you think, Nick?
There's three things I wanted to share. So the first one would be, and I often share this with people when I go out and I talk at different events. I'll say, you're not going to understand this, all of the bad things that are happening in the world and all of the craziness that we see, geopolitically. The only way to really make sense of it is to have a biblical worldview where you can see that there is a Satan and who really truly runs this world, and that there's God and there's a war between the two. Once you have that perspective, you can start to piece it together and understand why things are the way they are. The evidence of the Bible, I think the biggest, most obvious one is just Western civilization. Why did it flourish so much? Every Western country that was biblically sound, it prospered and it did really well because they were built on those principles. Those principles are true. You can build from those principles. Whereas you go to other parts of the world where they don't have those principles, it's a lot more idolatrous, and they're built on, they've got like the caste system and other systems that you can see the difference. All you got to do is look at one and look at the other and go, what's the difference here? Well, it's the principles that governs the society. It's the culture. And the other one that I wanted to raise, which is it's sort of in line with the evidence component that you brought up before. Evidence doesn't convert people and change people, because it's about the heart. So the evidence is the mind. The thought precedes the action, but what precedes the thought is the heart, the will. Right, the word heart that we have in our Bible is the word lev, or cardia in the Greek, and it means your will, the innermost you. It's where we get the word like core from, which is from the Latin, which means the same thing. It means the very center. So the very center of your being is the heart, which is your will. That's what's at the center of you. And often our will is bad and it's evil. Our Bibles tell us that, but we know that objectively, because when we look at, look throughout our past, all those mistakes we've made where we've been driven to do something that wasn't right, and you knew it wasn't right, but you still went after it because you wanted that particular thing. So you can convince somebody in the mind that this is the truth, but if they don't want the truth and they still want to go and live in the lie, it doesn't matter. And I think that's the other point. So certain people are going to come to a point in their life where they go, I really want the truth now. My heart's changed. My will's changed. And if they start applying those principles that are in the Bible, they start understanding them and holding them close to them, and placing them in their heart, they're going to find that their life is going to prosper and they're going to do really well. They're going to have integrity. They're going to have faith, which is the ability to persevere through all sorts of struggles beyond what other people can. And it's an understanding of those spiritual things that they can't even prove exist. And then they're going to have courage, which is another virtue that's lacking in the world today. When you remove God and remove the Bible and those biblical principles, you remove courage. And we see that in our Western society now, which has been infiltrated by Marxism and propaganda, where they've done everything they can to remove God. What's happened to the courage of the people? Well, it's lacking. So if you just look at things from, like the bigger picture, and you see the forest for the trees, you can see when we were a more biblical people, we prospered, we were better, our marriages were stronger, our families were stronger, and we were potentially far more intelligent. And now we've removed a lot of that from our culture and our society, and we can see the opposite occurring.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually because like what, just as you were speaking about that, Nick, what came to mind was like a perfect example is what happened during COVID. Like you could show people the statistics, and more people died from the flu in 2019 than from COVID in 2020 and 2021. And you show them, give them all the numbers and all the evidence, and they're still wearing masks. They go and get the vaccine.
They wanted to go to the pub.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
heart was on the pub.
Yeah, exactly. And that's a perfect example of that. There's so much more at play when it comes to, what's really how truth resonates for people. But also that, I agree that like I've never had any interest in, and actually funny because of what you said, Dotti, too, like my brother and I raised in the same household, been raised in the same way. He was very much that kid that he just had this interest in. I think he just came to my mum one day and said, "Mum, I want to read the Bible," when he was a little boy. And I was the complete opposite. Never had any interest. I actually really hated scripture at school. So it's funny, Nick, because I had scripture in public schooling, but I'm probably like 10, 15 years younger than you. So it would have been still very different. And I feel that within that setting, there was something in me that didn't resonate. And I don't even remember what they really were teaching us because I didn't pay much attention. But there was always something about it that I used to think, this is rubbish. Like I don't know why, right? But very young, so it was very intuitive. But now, like what you just said, Nick, about how you can see, like you get the worldview that I think is reflected in the Bible, I think is so important, because after the last 5 years, now I'm like, I actually really want to read the Bible, like, because I know that there are so many truths in there. So much has come out in the last few years that it's like, it's reflected in these stories that were written thousands of years ago. So yeah, I agree with you there. I think it can definitely bring a much deeper understanding of the world. And even that whole, the good versus evil thing, it definitely makes a lot of sense.
Well, I can just share one experience I had, and it was a while ago. It was a friend of mine. He was a really good fighter. He was an American guy, but he came over here and he did a lot of coaching here, and he had a decent UFC career as well. But he's been sucked in to the Marxist propaganda machine, and he's complaining about how bad his country is and his culture is. And this was on social media, and I just said to him, mate, the reason you've had the opportunities you've had is because we still have remnants of our biblical history. Because he was bagging out the Bible as well. And he was having a bit of an argument with me. But I was just explaining to him that so much of who he is biblical, and he doesn't even realize. And then I started sharing quotes with him. I said, these are all Bible verses. The truth will set you free. And a leopard changes spots. Iron sharpens iron. That's one that's in all the... These are all Bible verses. The writing's on the wall. Right, so we've got these. There's hundreds of them that are part of our common speech and how we think. So these ideas formulate how we think and the lenses that we wear. But people don't realise that it's biblical. It's something that they've received. They've been given an amazing view on the world, but they don't attribute it to anything biblical. They're actually against everything that's biblical. All of these people, because they've been taught to think that way. But the reality is, if they looked at it properly and were honest, they'd realise so much of what they are is a result of them holding to those principles and those values that they didn't even know came from the Bible in the first place.
Yeah, very interesting. Actually, and it's funny, I'll preface this, I'll say this now to preface the conversation, because we're going to talk a lot about Jesus in this conversation. And I again was very skeptical from even a very young child. And for a lot of my life, actually a lot of my adult life, I didn't believe that Jesus really existed, because again, I didn't have a strong, like in my upbringing, I didn't have that strong connection to Christianity. And then as I started to learn more of these, some of these different teachings that, it's all allegory and the stories of Jesus, so they can be, mapped to like, astrological and the stars and all these different things. I was like, nah, I don't think he really existed. But then I started noticing a lot more in the last, definitely in the last 5 years, that within film and TV and, just the modern culture, there is a concerted effort to implant into people's minds that Jesus didn't exist. And that's when I clocked on, where I was like, nah, they're putting too much effort into, oh yeah, Jesus didn't really exist or whatever. So there's got to be truth in that. And even when I met you, I think I was always like, oh, I'm a bit on the fence. I don't know. I lean more towards that he didn't exist. And now I'm the complete opposite. Because I also know I've heard too many stories, again, from all different walks of life, people that are more like religious, people that are just more sort of spiritual, but no religious ties, that have had experiences of Jesus in the spirit. I've heard so many different stories. And again, there's got to be truth to that. But I guess what I want to dive into here, and we spoke about this off air, Nick, and that's why I was like, we got to get you on again. I really want to dive into this belief that, and I don't even know what branches of Christianity this is specifically, because I don't know all the names, but these people that believe that you've got to go through Jesus to get to God, that Jesus is almost like this gatekeeper. But I also hear a lot in these particular branches of Christianity that they speak about Jesus like God. It's almost like God is secondary to Jesus. And there's a lot of teachings within those branches of Christianity that I totally disagree with. These are often the ones that also say that we're born in sin and that we're just, we're basically nothing until we take Jesus because he died for our sins and whatever. And I totally disagree with that, because if we were made in God's image, why are we born sinners? An innocent baby, an innocent child is a sinner already just from being born. I just totally disagree with that. So I'd love to get your opinions on that. And also like where you think those teachings come from, because a lot of what I hear too in these teachings is that a lot of what they're preaching was never actually anything that Jesus himself said. It was the things that were written about Jesus after. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, Dotti, do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
You go first, Nick.
Yeah, so as far as evidence of Jesus, there's more evidence for him than anyone. I mean, you've got Josephus, Roman historian. He was, he's probably one of the most prominent Roman historians. We've got Tacitus, another Roman, talks about Jesus. There's even, the Syrian Greeks that talk about Jesus. So historically, there's more evidence for him than there is for anyone else. On top of that, you've got the thousands of manuscripts that exist, like thousands and thousands, tens of thousands that exist, dating back to literally the first century, right? First and second century. That in and of itself is incredible. Like, how is there so much material handwritten?
What kind of manuscripts
back then?
Are these like the Bible manuscripts, or is this like extra, like just letters and
No,
people
these are
talking
biblical
about
manuscripts, but there is that. But what I was saying first is that there's testimonial evidence of the existence of Jesus amongst Jewish people of the time that exists today, Roman people, including Tacitus and Josephus, and also there's Greek historians as well, and there's there's even a letter. I think it's a letter. I can't remember his name, but he was a Syrian that wrote a letter as well. That's well known as well. Prominent letters. So there's all this other evidence outside of the Gospels and and all these other manuscripts that exist, and just the fact that we have thousands and thousands of New Testament manuscripts, right, of the handwritten, and they contain the exact same substance. What I mean by substance is they might have slight variations in how they're written, but the principle and the concepts that are portrayed in these writings are the same. So there's something to that.
Yeah.
Okay, that in and of itself is very significant. I would always say, if you're in doubt, just ask God. Leave it to God. Ask. You might find that if you do ask, you're going to get an answer, and if you get an answer, then you know. But the problem is, it's an issue of the heart. See, a lot of people don't want to ask because they don't want that to be true. But at the end of the day, you're not in control of what the truth is. The truth was before you even existed, and we've got to be transformed in a way that we can become consistent with the truth, as opposed to just going after our own will. Because that's so. He talked about born in sin. I think there's a lot of ideas to that. All of us sin, right? That's the evidence that we are living in a sinful world. But the reality is, we're not going to be left, and go to hell because of something that we actually didn't have any control over. None of us have the ability to not make these mistakes, because God's a merciful God, a loving God, and he's so loving that we can rely on that love. That's why he sent his son to actually go through, the suffering and ridicule beyond what anyone else would be able to do. And he didn't have to go through it. He could have just said, look, that's enough. I'm not doing this anymore. These people aren't worth it. But he didn't, because he was driven and motivated by love, because God is love.
Yeah.
So this is a concept that's a lot of people have trouble with and they struggle with. And the reason I think they struggle with it is it's not human. It's not anything that we can really comprehend fully with our minds, because we're like this in capacity, and the divine is unlimited, right? So, but we get it if we're honest and we look at what Jesus did, and we spend the time to try to understand it, and we pray and we ask for understanding and we ask for wisdom and we ask to be shown the truth. That should be enough, I would think, for most people to be able to come to a firm understanding that, there's some merit to this whole Jesus thing. But then on top of that, you've also got all the evidence that Jesus did exist. He wasn't a fictitious person. We've got all of this historical evidence, probably more than any other historical person on the earth. There'd be more historical evidence for Jesus than there would be for people like Napoleon even. Okay, there's loads. It's incredible. And the fact that the gospel message, like, people have different ideas of what that means, just means the truth. And the foundational truth of who God is and how he loves us, and that he's made a new covenant with us, which covenant's just like a marriage covenant. It's like a contract, but far deeper with us. And he's given us this amazing gift. That's the good news, something to be grateful for, something to have joy in. And that ended up going all around the world. Went to India. It's in China now. It's rapidly growing in China. You've got and it's interesting. This is more evidence for the power of the gospel. See, the gospel doesn't, the Christian modus operandi is not to go in, fight with force and force people to convert. There's other faiths out there that do that. That's exactly how they operate. But wherever the people are most persecuted, you will find the Christian church or assembly, not religious church, but like the real Christian people, they thrive. Happened in ancient Rome, where they were being fed to the lions, and it ended up taking over. So the fear and the torment and the horror of the evil of this world was no match for the righteousness and love that comes from God. And then you look at places like North Korea, where they just kill you if you're a Christian, or you get put into a you and your whole family, 3-generation forced labor camp if you're found with the Bible.
Wow.
Yet it's growing there. Why is the gospel growing there? Well, the reason is simple. It produces and provides hope, and it shows people the truth of who they are, which are the most valuable things. Same in Iran. Iran, you go to jail for 25 years if you convert to Christianity. Yet they reckon there's about 1.5 million Christians there. It's incredible, right? Underground Christians. 10 years in jail if you've got a Bible. And the fact that 52 countries right now severely persecute Christians and heavily restrict the Bible, if not completely, that tells you something, doesn't it? No other faith is persecuted like that. No other faith. And you know why? Because this is the world of lies. It's run by the enemy, Satan. He's literally the God of this world. Like Jesus says, my kingdom's not of this world. That's the reality. And the people that want to be with Christ, they're in Satan's domain. So the only way that you can actually have the faith and the courage to live according to those principles is to be literally a rebel to the forces of this world, a real rebel, and you need faith and courage. And the only way you can have that is by knowing the truth of who God is and how reliable God is. And that's why people in places like China, Pakistan, Afghanistan, North Korea, Iran, where they're severely persecuted for being Christians, yet the Christian church there is growing rapidly. And that's the proof, I think, of what the gospel produces and what it really is.
Interesting. What are your thoughts, Dotti?
Wow. We covered a lot there.
Yeah.
So, look, where do you start with that? It's the fact is that Jesus said that he and God is one, right? Scripture says that. He said, where you see me, you see the Father. And, they're one. And part of, what Nick's talking about is that the reason that the people in those countries, they have found truth, but they also know who they are in God, not just who God is. And that's why they've got such strong standing, because they know that this world is just, we're here for a time, and death has no sting. And the reason that it has no sting is because what Jesus represents. He represents, this incredible relationship with God, and he is the perfect representation of what we can be in a relationship with God on this earth as well. So, people often stop that, Jesus died on the cross, but let's go beyond what happened at the cross, because he broke and fulfilled the law of what Satan's jurisdiction on the earth. Adam and Eve made a covenant with Lucifer and gave him the keys to this earth. The earth was the center of God's creation, as we are. So Jesus dying on the cross took back what was stolen and has given it to us. And this is where we need to rise up in knowing who we are, so that we can start taking back what has been, number one, stolen, but what Jesus actually represents. And when you look at the Catholic Church or any religion, they keep us minimized. They keep us basically at the foot of the cross, or Jesus still on the cross, and doing works when it's all been fulfilled. So let's look at the other side of that. We can live limitless because of what Jesus did on the cross. We can live a life of abundance. We can live a life filled with power, because these are all the things that Jesus did that gave back to us. So, Jesus is incredible, and to have encounters with him is life-changing, absolutely life-changing. And it is as simple as asking him into your heart. Like Nick said, it's a heart thing. But it's more than that. It's stepping up into the invisible realm, which is the spirit realm. Because again, in Colossians it says, I didn't come just in word, I came in power. We need to grab hold of the power and start, releasing that into our own lives, but into other people's lives, and bringing the fullness of what was done on the cross, the fullness of what Jesus represents, which is that transfiguration, transformational, and having that encounter in the spirit, that brings the change. So, we talk about, you talked about government, governing the mind. That is the system that we are under. They are constantly programming us, which the Catholic Church has done really, really well. Absolutely really well. And that was their whole plan. The Catholic Church is Freemasonry. New Age is another version of Freemason. And this is where we need to start being aware of their symbols, of the contracts, the spiritual contracts we make with them, so that we don't contract back into coming under the ruler of this world. We stay in covenant, which is again a contract, which is our free will, connected with God in the Spirit, moving by the Spirit because of what Jesus did and his representation on the earth. There is a fullness that people still have not grasped of in the representation and the conversation about Jesus. We're still, I feel we're still mixing, parts of the works mentality, the trials and the tribulations, and I've got to carry my cross. If we have that conversation or we have that mindset, we are diminishing what has been done for us. We have an open heaven. We have the spirit realm that's open to us. We've just got to choose to partake. We've got to choose to open our hearts. And basically, to me, it's like get the mind out of the way and step into everything that's been given to us. And, this is what's on offer. This is the offer. We choose to consent or we choose not to take the offer. The offer is life and life abundantly. It's to know who God is. He is love. He is mercy. He is always in momentum, working on our behalf all the time. And that's what's there. We can get caught up with, the different translations or, the politics of religion. But I'm sorry, I don't want to play that game. I just want to have, this beautiful relationship that I've been given, that I've walked in for 45 years. It's been my whole foundation and grounding in life. And I get to share that with those that want to hear about it and experience it. It's power. It's life-changing. It's words of encouragement. It's words of edification that we breathe and speak life into one another. We are in such a short, season of this world where Satan is being exposed for who he is. That's the season that we're in, guys. He is being exposed. And eyes are being opened to the fact of the evil of this world. And we're coming out from under it and stepping into the 1,000 years of peace, the rule and reign, and the new heaven and the new earth. Well, I ask people, I go, well, what does a new heaven and new earth look like to you? What would that look like? Most of them have got no idea. They go, I don't know. Oh, we'll have lots of money. No. A new heaven and a new earth is where we are in full unity, where we are in communion with one another, that, there is a love and respect and integrity, that we honor one another no matter where we're at. Whether, we are pre-believers or believers, there's always respect and honor.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very well spoken.
Love it.
Y'all both are getting me all fired up. And I realize what my I guess motivation for this and asking some of these tough questions and like not accepting sort of the stock standard Christian responses, all the knee-jerk stuff that I grew up with. And you'll probably remember there was a parable that Jesus taught about the master, and he has talents, and he gives like gold pieces or whatever, and he gives them to 3 servants. One of the servants doesn't want to lose it. He's afraid, so he buries it so he doesn't lose it. And the other one, he goes out and like brings back like a double investment. And the other one, reinvests it and does like a triple investment. And I see a lot of like the mainstream Christianity as that servant who buried the talent. Because when the master comes back and he checks on the people that he gave the treasure to, the gold, he was angry with the one who just buried it. Because he's like, he just takes it from him. I'm taking the gift that I gave you and I'm giving it to the guy who tripled the investment. And I see that with the word. I see that with people that, like we take for granted some of these concepts and we don't go deeper into it. We don't explore it. We don't expand, not making up things extra biblically that don't exist there, but going deeper into it and experiencing it and living that. And I see that with, not to just point blame and judgment, but it's like my dad he grew up Catholic, and we've been aware of this our whole lives, because in the Catholic religion, they don't teach people to read the Bible and study it. You know, you go to the priest and the priest will tell you to offer atonement or to do all these different things. Most of the stuff they teach aren't in the Bible that you have to do. You know, you got to say Hail Mary. Why are they putting like in my sister's town, St. Mary's, Kansas, not to throw shade at them, but it's like, why does Mary have a statue on top of the building that they just built? They put millions of dollars into building this brand new cathedral.
I know Dotti's got some theories on that.
Yeah, Mary's on top of it. It's like, because they're like sheep that have been led astray, and they're off doing something that God's like, what is that even? Like, what are you guys even doing there?
The fact of the matter is that we are actually under, the Queen of Heaven or the Queen of Darkness, and you will find her statue in every city of the world, which she is part of the Catholic Church. That is who they actually worship. And the Hail Mary is written to honour her, to worship her. That's why we have the rosary bead, because it's all about the Virgin Mary. And they've actually exalted Mary. That's why you see Mary with the baby Jesus, because the Queen of Heaven is higher than Jesus. So this is all through their symbolisms. It's the sculptures, the pictures in all the Roman Catholic churches and basilicas are full of pagan idols that is worshipped. And this is what the lid is coming out of. And it's really exciting, because they're questions that I asked as a child. I go, why is the green man in the church? If you know who the green man is. Why is there such nudity, with little children and, the snake and all this sort of thing? Well, as Alexa knows, I'm unpacking a whole series to educate people as well as myself on what they all represent and symbolizes, and then what evil does with those things. So it's a really good question. And they have churches, towns that are dedicated to the Queen of Heaven. Well, if you wanted to look at Revelation 18, it talks about coming out from Babylon. And that is coming out from underneath the influence of the Queen of Heaven, which is the Queen of Darkness, who is related and works for Lucifer. Once we start breaking all those contracts, we're going to see huge shifts over people's lives and the earth.
Absolutely.
It's interesting you said, you mentioned the parable of the talents. It's one of my favourites, because that's, for context, that's Matthew 25. So Matthew 24 is all about the end of the age and what they call like the tribulation period. And then there's a continuation. It's the same speech, and the parable of the talents, I believe, is there. I'm pretty sure that's one of them. Anyway, it might be another. I'm pretty sure it's there though. But the point is, the man that has the one talent, he buries it in the earth because he's scared. Right now, we know the biblical teaching all through the Bible on fear is to not fear. Right, that's one of the main messages, not to fear. Now, is that a good message? Well, yeah, it is a good message, because fear destroys your capacity and your ability. But you see the other people that did something with their talents, they obviously were the opposite, and they had faith. Now, we're saved by grace through faith, right? So faith is the belief and understanding and assurance that God's character and God's person will give you the power to prevail. And when you understand that the talents that they're talking about are spiritual things, God gives us spiritual things, not physical things, right? It's spiritual things. Like some people have courage, some people have intellect, some people have the ability to break down things, some people have incredible confidence, and they have a number of these different characteristics. I always had a very strong sense of justice, and I know as a child I remember that sense of justice existed in me there, and I still have it now. It hasn't changed. It's just become probably more refined. But it takes faith to apply those principles in a world that's against it. So the world is against righteousness in any form. Okay, that's what this world is. It's evil. Now, and I know people might have issue with me saying that, but the world is evil, right? You just got to look at it. It's evil. But there is good in the world because there's people that have all of us are born with a conscience. That's the light of God, which is in John chapter 1. It's the light that lights every man that comes into the world. So we've got this conscience, and I think that's what Israel truly means. He who wrestles with God and prevails. We wrestle with God. It's the light of God that's within us, and it's the external voices screaming and yelling at us. Only the people with faith will apply those gifts, those talents that come from God in a way that actually produces something good. The ones that won't are the ones that are overcome with fear, and they'll go, you know what, I should have had courage there. I should have stood up for those people. I should have defended those people. I should have shown love to those people, but I was scared that people would not be my friends anymore, or I was scared I'd lose my job, or that the media would call me nasty, mean names, right? That's what's going on. So I look at it from that perspective, and I see that the influence that the enemy has is really just peer pressure, fear, and it's money, right? They can influence people with bribery. Like, we'll give you lots of money if you go along with this agenda, or it's we'll take away money from you if you don't go along with this agenda, or we will call you nasty names if you have an opinion that's not in line with the agenda. But the people that have faith are the ones that actually put those principles, those talents, to work, and they actually apply them. And that's how we resist the destructive forces, and that's what's going on now. And if more of us did that and just applied that righteousness that is within us, we would actually see there would be a lot less power coming from the other side, because we would be able to resist it and destroy it very quickly. And the main most effective way I think we do that is by letting the light shine. So when you do those things that you're inspired to do with that spirit, people see it and they become inspired by it, and they say, Alexa, I just saw you have incredible courage. Wow, that inspired me. I want to do the same thing. That was amazing. Oh, I'm totally converted to this idea. Let's have courage. Let's do it. And that's what they don't want us to do. So if you were to do something like that, that would be the one who did something with their talents, as opposed to the one that goes, I'm too scared to do what I know I should do, because we know inside what we should be doing. But we do all sorts of we come up with all sorts of mechanisms to avoid doing those things that are hard, including justifying why we don't have to do something, or putting something off. Oh, not yet. I'll do it soon, and then it's too late. So I think that's to put it into perspective. It is simply whether or not you have the faith to apply the principles that God's given you and the gifts, or if you don't. And if you don't, you're going to lose it all. And if you do, you're going to gain a lot more. And that's the meaning of life, summed up very briefly. That's our purpose, in my opinion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Really.
And
do you want to get in? Oh, say what you
I was just going to say, I can attest to, as someone who, honestly, for most of my life, I didn't know God. I didn't know what God was. I didn't know who he was. I didn't feel a connection to him. And it's interesting because, so just a bit about my background. So my dad is Serbian Orthodox, so Christian, and the kind of the older teachings or whatever. And so I was christened Serbian Orthodox, and we've always done, we've gone to church for, well, really only weddings and funerals, to be honest. But, I've been inside the church, but then my mum was raised Catholic, but very similar to you, Dot, just from quite a young age, she knew that there was just something wrong with the Catholic Church, but always had a very, very strong connection to God. And so we were kind of raised with like these different perspectives. And then also my mum, she learned a lot of like Buddhist teachings and a little bit of Hinduism and like all these things. Like she never got super deep into them, but we were kind of exposed to all these different philosophies. But yeah, for me, and again, like I said, my brother was very drawn to, he just wanted to read the Bible at a quite a young age. And I always felt very lost with that. And it wasn't until kind of like my early adulthood, that's when I really started to question. Like I remember I was very lost in my life at this time. And I used to sit and think like, what is God? I had no idea. Like I had no idea I felt like I'd never even experienced God. And I've spent a lot of the last, I would say probably 7-8 years, like the better part of a decade, really starting to explore that more and just allowing it to unfold. And now I'm at a point where I 100% know God. I feel God. I know who I am. That was a big part of it too. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know why I was put here. Like all those existential questions that quite a lot of people face. But I just wanted to, so going back to Jesus, because I want to ask this question because I've got a friend who's exploring this now, exploring Christianity. And, some of the teachings that she's learning is this, that you've got to take Jesus into your heart to get to God. You won't know God. God won't know you if you don't take Jesus. But, the argument I have with that is, I've been very, very skeptical of Jesus in the past. And now, yes, I agree that, he was a real man and he existed and all of that. But I haven't had any personal experience with Jesus. I haven't had, those experiences that I hear that people have. And I don't know that to be 100% true in the way that I know God to be 100% true. So my question is, do you how do I want to frame this? Like, let me give a hypothetical. So a child's been raised in a household, in a community, family, whatever, that, never spoke about Jesus, but they know God. They've taught, they know God. They communicate with God. They feel God. They live in honor and integrity and all of these things. But Jesus isn't in the picture. Now, do we have to believe in Jesus and the teachings to have the same experience of God?
In the picture, because, and this is where I think people mix it up. The person of Jesus might not be. Mm-hmm. But the character of Jesus is, right? So remember, Jesus is not just this person that was a physical being. He's also a spirit. It says it's the light that lights every man. If you read John chapter 1, it literally explains it in detail. Mm-hmm. Everybody that's born is born with this light, and that light is Christ. It's literally where we get our conscience from. So people that value those principles that are written on their heart, I know this is wrong, so I can't do that. I know this is right, so I have to do that. I value love because love doesn't come from anywhere else. Like true love, the love that is godly, that only comes from God. Mm. So if you value that, that's because it's the only reason you know it is because you've actually got a conscience that teaches you what that is. Yeah. It's the spirit of truth. It confirms these things to you. We have this inside of us. Just because you don't know that comes from Jesus doesn't mean it's not Jesus. God can give you a gift without saying, hey, I'm God, and here's a gift that I'm giving you. It's called love. It's very valuable, and I want you to hold it close to your heart. I want you to live by these principles. He can give that to you without telling you it's from him. And then you might think, well, I don't really know Jesus, but you do. You just don't realize that you do. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, just real quick before I'll pass it off to Dotti. So people call him Jesus, but what is his actual name and what does that mean in the original language?
Yeah, it's Yehoshua, which just means it's the name of God. Yod He Vav He, the self-existent one, saves.
God saves.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it, Dotti.
Well, what were you going to ask me, Isaac?
Well, just that about knowing that Jesus is real, your experience about it.
Well, it's just more about these teachings that if you don't accept Jesus, into your heart. And again, I think I love how you explain it, Nick, because I think a lot of these teachings are they're very literalist. That like of, you know, these teachings that essentially come from the Bible, but they're taken so literally. And then of course they can be interpreted in different ways. But yeah, just this teaching that if you don't accept Jesus and you don't believe in Jesus, you'll never get to God and you'll never know God.
Okay, so let's look at the origin of that. The reason that whole concept came out through particularly the Catholic Church, and then went into the evangelical and the Pentecostal movement, is that to me, it is like a form of control. It has fear attached to it. And, you know, it's like, and also it manipulated people to try and go out and make people believers. So, and that has never sat with me. And actually, I really appreciate how Nick summarized the God consciousness and God and Jesus, in the sense that we already have the DNA of God within us. We are his creation. So, you know, reflecting on my experience of the Spirit was the truth of who I really was, rather than living in the truth that the world had told me. In other words, the programming that I had been brought up in. And that it ignites and brings alive the Spirit within you, which is the very DNA of God. And I don't want to use the word Christ consciousness, because I feel that it's becoming, it's got a twist on it as far as the world is presenting at the moment.
It's become very new age, that term.
It is a new age term. And, you know, we talk about Christ consciousness. And there is an awareness, you know, of what he represents to us. But I've got to go back again to Scripture where it says, you know, Jesus said, me and my Father are one. God and Jesus are one. And, you know, we are part of his creation. So we have the very DNA of God within us. So it's awakening and igniting that light and that truth of who we are, and God in us, with us, and through us. We are not demigods, which a lot of teaching is now, you know, well, I'm like God. That's not what I'm saying either. It is the connection of the truth of who we are. And as Nick said before, it's the way, the truth, and the life. So this is what's happening globally. People are, you know, on Empower doing NOLs that are bringing them into a spiritual connection, which is then they're reading the Bible. They're wanting to understand God without being having the religious background. Well, it's happening in other groups that I'm hearing about, that are educating people about, you know, their straw man and, you know, the law and that. And they're now becoming open to the spirit aspect of who they are. And this to me is exciting days, because we're coming into the truth, who God is for us, who he really is, his character, who he represents. As Nick said, he's a God of love and mercy. He's a God of compassion. And the one thing that I know is that God is always moving on our behalf. So he will, you know, bring events around to enable us to make that choice of stepping into that truth. When at 23, I was not in a lot of people go, oh yeah, I was devastated and I was broken and I was homeless and then I found God. I don't have that testimony. My life was great, but there was a crossroad that I came to when the simple words, I knew of God, I knew of Jesus, I knew of the Bible, but it was as simple as, God, come into my life. I give you my heart. And that is where I physically felt my heart turning my chest. And the heart that was guarded and protected became opened. And in Jeremiah, it states, I'll turn your heart of stone into a heart of flesh. And that is my encounter. And I know lots of other people have had that too. Nick, your sharing of the wind of the Spirit, coming in force is probably exactly what you needed to experience. I needed to experience my heart turning my chest, which made me a completely different person. Even to the point that the next day, the clothes that I would normally wear, I couldn't even wear them. They just felt wrong. That's how much I was changed. And that is the invitation for everybody.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. So you got the conscience, right? This is so important. We overlook it. The value of our conscience. We have something within us that tells us the difference between right and wrong. Now, when you read the Bible, you can interpret that according to the conscience, partially according to the conscience, or without the conscience, and you'll interpret it differently. But the way I read the Bible is I read it, and if it doesn't make conscionable sense to me, then I have to dig deeper. It doesn't make sense. How could that be? Until I can reconcile the idea with my conscience. The other part with regards to the conscience is that a conscience is like a sense that's calibrated by the life that we live in. Now, I'll give you an example. 100 years ago, a woman would walk into a room and the men wouldn't swear. They'll take their hats off. Now, men would just swear and talk in front of a woman like she's a man. So you see the difference between how our conscience has been affected through culture and through the influences, right? It's been recalibrated and it's been debased. So when we can read the Bible in one way to clarify and to recalibrate our conscience. This is what's correct. This is how I should be applying these principles. This is how I should feel about these things. But on the other side, we can look at the Bible, the biblical text, and we should use our conscience to enable us to interpret it, which should be in line with what our conscience dictates. Those two they're your two witnesses, the Spirit that's within you and the external booklet that explains what the Spirit has declared to prophets past. So you read the book, you're not sure about something, and there's several ways you can interpret it. It's got to be consistent with your conscience. But also your conscience needs some work done to it too. It needs to be calibrated according to sound principles, because obviously the music now is destructive, the propaganda, the false ideas, all of this impacts our ability to resonate with it impacts our conscience.
Absolutely.
And that's how we end up with like societies where, like you look at some of the harshest societies where they're indoctrinated. You think of all those people that are enforcing all the madness and the killing of others. They're not doing it according to their conscience. Their conscience, and there's a Bible verse that talks about this. It says the conscience was seared with a hot iron, right? They're having their conscience seared with a hot iron so that the sensory aspect of it doesn't really work anymore. And then they lose their conscience.
Yeah, I just wanted to say quickly, that was such a good point to make, Nick, because I agree, like our conscience has definitely been, I would say, hijacked. I think it's something to be aware of, because this is what we were just listening to something last week that was, I'm not going to get into it, but basically a marriage where they're bringing people into their marriage now. It's all this new age spiritual rubbish. And, a lot of what they were saying was, and that's my truth, and that's the truth that I feel in my body and whatever. And we're both listening to this going, that is not truth. That's not capital T truth. That's your truth. And this is where I think, like, the conscience, when it's hijacked, it's like, oh, but that's truth and it's okay, because they're taking on all these ideas, these external ideas that aren't in line with moral principles that come from God.
Well, if you think about it, the every lie that you hold to, I interpret that as being the closing of a door within us, right? And the Bible tells us that our mind is a doorway to the spiritual world. It says it in Psalms 24, it says, lift up your heads, talking about your head. O ye gates, calls it a gate. Be ye lifted up, your everlasting doors, calls you everlasting doors. And the King of glory shall come in. And then it explains the King of glory is God. And then we know from other scriptures that God is a spirit. So it's a spiritual gateway. But it's a spiritual gateway to God who's truth. Now, when you hold on to lies in your mind and in your heart, what happens is you're closing those doors. And then you have less capacity and understanding to be able to. It's like damming up the river.
Yeah.
You're no longer flowing. It's just dammed up. And then when that dams up, that's the destructive. That's how you destroy a river, isn't it? You dam it up and it just starts to rot. The water goes stagnant, right? So this is what's happening to people, especially with their conscience. And when you understand the conscience is the light of God that you're born with, even like if you look at with a microscope, I think I might have shared this last time, when the sperm hits the egg, you can see with microscopes now, like these really sophisticated microscopes, you can actually see videos of it. There's a big burst of light, which proves to us that life begins at conception, right? That it literally does. The fact that the Bible said 2,000 years ago, it's the light that lights everyone that comes into the world. So that conscience, it's pure and perfect, but then it gets calibrated in this world with all the destructive ideology, all the false things, all the awful things. You think of those abuse victims. Some young child that's pure and innocent, that's got a perfectly intact conscience, gets attacked and hurt by evil people, gets damaged. Or let's say a child that has their parents, they're separated from their parents and put into state care, and there's no love there, right? How is that going to impact the conscience of that child at a young age? And that's what they're doing, and it's systemic now. Yeah, they're systemically attacking the conscience, which is the light of God that's within the children, with all of the ideology in this school systems now. All of it. It's there's elements of it, whether it be the gender stuff, gender-based violence. They teach that at age 7 now in the schools in Victoria, right? All of this stuff that's destructive, and that's going to impact what they consider to be correct and true. So then when they are presented with true principles, they're unable to really comprehend them and apply them properly, because the one sensor that they have that enables them to apply them properly has been damaged. Yeah, it's got to be recalibrated, and the way you recalibrate it is really reading the biblical text and being around and surrounding yourself with people who are righteous in that capacity, who have real integrity and real honesty and real virtues, and those virtues will then impact your conscience. And that's why the idea of church as an assembly or a community, which really, if you look at it from a more modern concept, you could call church being around your people, right? That would be kind of what it is, being around people that believe in freedom, justice, truth, and all of these other, really important principles that we now value a lot because we've had them taken from us for a short time. And by doing that, that's going to recalibrate that sensor we call the conscience as well, so that it now is more aligned with what its intention was in the first place.
Yeah. And what just came up for me now, one of the very few things I know from the Bible is that saying you will know him by his fruits. And I think that's just what you said then is like, that's what resonates to me as truth. Like someone can tell me they're a Christian, but if they're like, drinking every night, beating up their wife but they go to church on a Sunday, I'm sorry, but you're not living very, quote unquote God-like or with God in your heart.
I had a guy yesterday message me and he said he was talking about Islam and how they're what they're doing to people in some of these countries, and he said the Christians also have committed heinous atrocities, and I said no, real Christians haven't done that. People that say they have. Yeah. But there's no. If you're a Christian means a follower of Christ. If you're an actual follower of Christ, you don't do those things.
That's
by
right.
virtue of doing those things, you are not a follower of Christ, even if you say you are.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I would say the same for the Muslims. If they're really following what their scriptures say, like they wouldn't be dishonoring God's creation like that. But I don't know the Quran super well. What were you going to say, Dotti?
Yeah, go ahead, Dot.
Oh, I thought we got past that because I went, this is what's on offer, that we can all, ask God to come into our life. And then, and there is an exchange there. There's a surrendering of you being doing life your way, but stepping into the principles and the values that God has, the moral values, which is what you're talking about here. Because, there are too many, even in the freedom movement, there are people that say, yeah, we're on the same page, but their fruits prove different. And this is where we have to get a lot more discerning. Like you're talking about talents earlier. There are the talents which are the gifts of the Spirit that we need to be more discerning. We need to, and this is what I love about Jesus, is Jesus could read the heart, the intent of the heart. And this is what's available to us. So we start to see people for who they are, not to bring judgment or criticism or, condemnation, but to see that, how we can work with them, or how, what the friendship's really going to be like. Because too often people have used the word, oh yeah, they're Christian businessmen, and they've ripped people off because they've used that token word that everyone thinks that means they're good people. We have to be a lot more discerning in what's, showing its face globally at the moment as well. And that, again, it's part of the fruits of the Spirit. It's the talents that God has given us when you are moving with him and have accepted him into your life.
Yeah. And going back to the names of God, or the names of Jesus, I forget which one it was. I was getting at with, I thought it was Yehoshua or Yeshua, but there's one where it might be Emmanuel, but it's like God in us or God with us.
God with us. Emmanuel means God with us.
Yeah, God with us. And that's, it just reminded me of what you were talking about even though you don't know the name Christ and you don't have like any relationship with the man, but you have that within you or with you. And
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could maybe differentiate between what we commonly understand as the heart in, Christianity, or in the Bible. It says the heart is deceitfully wicked, who can know it? But colloquially,
Jeremiah.
or with us here, we're like, well, we, like men, like good men, need to be heart centered, like connected with our heart, to be centered in that, because you go outside of that and you start getting into, more of the ego and some destructive patterns. But like we know, like we've talked about that, like my heart's not deceitfully wicked. When I think of my heart, like what my heart truly is, there's deceits that can come in. So maybe what's the difference between the heart that they're talking about there and the heart that I'm speaking
No, it's the same heart. It's just that the heart just means the things you want, what you will, what you're driven for. That's what your will is. And we are driven for a lot of things that are wrong, but over, the conversion process can take time. Well, that's why we're meant to submit our will, our heart to God. We submit it to God. We go, you know what, I want to do all these things that are wrong, but I need to realize that actually what you want for me is better. And then we submit our will over to God. And that requires faith, because I might think, well, I'm going to set up an empire. I'm going to set up a business empire. Like I had gyms before. I'm going to set up gyms. I'm going to have a whole chain of gyms. I'm going to have heaps of money. Well, that's actually taking me completely off path. That's a selfish ambition. I might say, well, I'll give some of that to help people in the community. I'll do some good, but it's not your purpose, right? That's a worldly purpose, and that's about vain ambition and ego. So, and it's also glorifying yourself. I'm going to do this. But the reality is, we to be right with God, we've got to be saying, I don't know what's right to do. I don't know what you created me to do. I need you to help me and guide me. And I'll submit my will, my wants over to you. And you look at the disciples as an example of that. They gave up so much. They gave up their lives in the end to proclaim the gospel message. And there's a principle in there, or a Bible verse that says, where little is given, little is required, much is given, much is required. These people had been with Christ. They'd been with him directly. So a lot was required of them. And they had to give up their lives in the end, and they were happy to do so. from what we read anyway. They were willing to go through and bear all things for Christ. So the idea of the heart is that our wants in this world are evil. Okay, people, there's all sorts of things, vanity, pride. Like I was in the fight world. I as I started to get to the top ranks, I started to become quite ambitious and quite vain and was more prideful and arrogant. I could feel that knocking on the door all the time. And then I ended up giving it away because I didn't want to do that anymore. I realized everything that's driving this, my motivation now, isn't in line with God anymore.
Yeah, they literally have one in the States called the Pride Fights. It's like one of the precursors before UFC. They called them Pride Fights.
Wow.
Pride FC. It was the Japanese circuit, and then the UFC bought them out, and they took all their contracted fighters over to the UFC because it was the other competition.
Entertaining though. Yeah,
yeah, but that was the point. Like I had to submit my will. I wanted to become, one of the top fighters and have the career. I got a UFC I got an email from Joe Silva asking for me to fight on the Brisbane card. They had a UFC card in Brisbane, and I didn't want to do it anymore because I knew what it was. I would have been contracted to at least another 3 fights. I would have had to be completely committed to that, and that would have taken probably another 2 years of my life, potentially, away, and I didn't want to do that. So that was submitting at least part of my will over to God, where I had to say, I know that this is not good for me, even though I want it. My heart says, this is good, go get it. I want this. But the deeper part of me, which is this, I'd call it the still small voice, that little voice is saying, but Nick, it's not really good for you and you know it's not. But I'm here, I want you to go a different direction. And I had to make a choice. Do I go my selfish route or do I go the selfless route, the faithful route where I have to rely on God now? And I might have to, I might lose opportunities, lose money, lose wealth, lose status, lose all of these things. I'll lose them. I know I won't have them in the immediate future. But right now I could take this other step in the wrong direction. I could get all of those things straight away. And I chose not to because of my faith. And that was me submitting my will over to God. So the heart wanted the thing that was wrong. It's desperately wicked. Who can know it? But we submit that heart, that desperately wicked will, over to God, and we say, I know that I know what you want for me is better than what I want for me. And I know your will is better than my will. So I'm going to submit it over to you. And I know that you're telling me this is the wrong thing to do. So I'm going to step aside from this in faith, believing that you will make me more capable and more trustworthy to fulfill something that's divine that you have for me to do, something that's far greater. And that's, I think, what you're talking about, where the heart's desperately wicked, but we also have the ability to choose to hold on to God's will in our heart. If we have a relationship with God, we can know that God doesn't want us going in that direction. So even though I want to, my heart says go that way, God's heart is also in there because I've got a relationship with him. And that's the fight that's going on. I think that's the wrestle with God. He who wrestles with God and prevails. I'm fighting between the external voices that are saying, go this way. Ambition, pride, vanity, status, money, wealth. Look at me, ego. And then I've got that voice inside of God saying, don't go that way. And then there's the fight. I'm wrestling with these two. Which way do I go? And then when you choose to go with God, you've prevailed. And that's what it is to wrestle with God. That's what the word Israel means. That's the literal meaning of it. Israel, he who wrestles with God and prevails.
Go for it, Dotti. I'd love to hear your opinion on this.
Well, I guess it depends on how you're wired, because to me, what you're sharing there is more a head thing for me. Like my heart and surrendering. It's like my heart is just full of just wanting God in every aspect. That's as simple as that for me. And sometimes my head goes, oh yeah, but you could do this and you could be that, but it never sits, because I'm not driven like that. And when I'm not sure of which way to go, I just always surrender. There's a little song that I sing actually, and I find often when I'm contemplating or percolating on things, this little song just rises up, and I know that that's what God's asking me to do. And it's just about surrendering. I just go, God, I surrender. I hand over everything that I think, or even sometimes I've gone, God, I don't know what I need, but you know what I need better. And he comes through every time. He guides me every time, and he leads me. And I have full trust in that, absolutely full trust in that. And because there's the absolutes in God that I, percolate, I meditate on. The absolutes of God is that he will never leave me. He'll never forsake me. He will never abandon me. He will always lead me. He will always guide me. And, you've got Psalm 23 and you've got Psalm 91 that talks about that. And, those journeys, each verse is, some people just read it in a whole chapter, but I sit in each verse and I let it percolate and I let God show me. And I've had encounters, or the verses become a portal for me, that he's taken me to something and shown me and stamped it on my heart, the very experience of that verse. So, for me, it's just, I just surrender. I just surrender to God and have full trust in him, full guidance in him. Is there some things that there's times that I get that. But then it's go, okay, God, what do I need to deal with? What is it in me that's causing that type of aspect? And it's so we're constantly self-processing. And that's how you grow more and more in God as well. It's like, if something can't, if I feel insecure in something, then I'm asking God, why do I feel insecure? What is it that's the root issue there? Is it something that has happened to me? Is it something that's been said to me? And I need to deal with that. I can't gloss over it because it'll come back again. I'm going to process that and deal with that. And, to me, 95% of going through the process is acknowledging the issue that's within me. And then handing it over to God, or bring healing to it, or break that generational, frequency and energy that's on my family line. They're all the tools that are available to us to, keep growing deeper and stronger in the relationship with God. And that is our journey while we're here on earth, is to just keep going deeper and, just coming to the fullness of what we have available to us, the fullness of knowing who God is, the absolutes of his character, but also the fullness of knowing who I really am in him. Not what my mother told me, not what school told me, not what religion told me, not what, men have told me, not what women have told me, but into that, that inner peace and strength and courage of knowing who I am. And the truth of that is what is, again, on offer for all of us. It's when Nick and I are not special. We've just people that have come into an incredible encounter with God that's been life-changing. And again, it's available for anyone that wants to ask God to come into their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to touch on a couple of things. So I find it really interesting first, Nick, that what the way that you speak about the heart and it's the will, and it can be, well, so what's interesting is that in human design, which is something that I use in my work, it's kind of a blend of a few different schools of thought, and basically gives you like an energetic blueprint of who you are when you come into the world. And part of it is the body graph, which is basically shows like the body graph is kind of like the energy centers. And in human design, they say that two of the energy centers, which most people are very commonly know the chakra system, which is 7 energy centers. There's way more than that. But in human design, that 2 of the energy centers split off. And so one of them was the heart. And so one is the G center or the identity center. The other one is the heart, will, and ego center, which is really interesting, Nick, because that really speaks to that. And what I was just thinking too is that with what you're saying, like we live in this realm of duality, right? There's a polarity in everything. And in everything, especially within us, there are, well, in human design, they say there's a gift and a shadow in everything. And I think that really speaks to that too, because the gift of that, like from the human design perspective, the heart, will, and ego center, the gift of that is that people that have it defined have just this really strong willpower and motivation and drive. But the shadow side, for people that don't have it defined, they can be driven by or feel like the conditioning is that they will do things to derive value. Like they don't see their own self-worth, and then so they'll do things to derive value out of the doing. So that's really interesting, because that, again, these are the kind of things when like I hear you speak about that, but then this completely different perspective, they're basically kind of they're very similar in the message.
It's the same. It's the same, because I just get that completely from the Bible, in that's what it teaches about the will and about which is the heart. It's the same word that they use in both the New Testament and the Old Testament. It's separate with the different words, but it's the same exact meaning. It's the equivalent. Yeah, and it means the innermost you, your will can be your it can be the emotional center, the things that drive you. And because we're driven, the mind thinks about the things it wants. That's what it does. So within you, you've got something that's driven at once, and then it goes to your mind, and you go, how do I get that? How do I get the thing that I want? And then you go out and do it. That's the order that I understand, and that's what I read biblically. That's a lot of the time the things that we want are wrong, and they're not good. They're selfish. They're ambitious for the wrong reasons. And then and then we think about, how do I get that? And then we start, because if it's a bad thing that we want, that our heart is holding on to, then the thought process is going to be destructive. I'm going to have to do something that's going to be immoral to get there. I'm going to have to step over somebody, lie. And then obviously the actions and the words come after that, which would be the lying, the fraud, whatever it is that you've got to do to get the thing that you want that isn't right for you to have. But when you submit your will to the things of God, like integrity, and integrity is the primary, that's your structure of who you are, and for it to have any integrity, you've got to be built on the truth. Because that's what's solid. And the reason it's solid is it's unchanging. It doesn't change. Truth is the same yesterday, today, and forever. That's what we read in the Bible, but it makes sense, right? Yet we see in the world today, the truth is, what they say is the truth is changing all the time. So you don't want to be conformed to those ideas that are always changing, because you can never have integrity, because everything's changing all the time. So your structure's changing. So you might be built on something and build something up really big, and then all of a sudden everything changes. That's not true anymore, and the government's changed this, and society's changed in this way, and then it all crumbles. But when your heart values the things of God, like truth, actual truth that we can objectively see or even subjectively understand, and if we value love, like true love, not the redefinition of love, which is just like it really just means tolerance, and if we value kindness, goodness, selflessness, these are all biblical principles. Jesus washed the feet of the disciples, and he said, "Let he who is great be your servant." The greatest people serve the most. So you might not want to do that. You might want to be somebody that goes, but I want to be up the top there. I want to be sitting in the nice seats. at the fight show or at some event. I want to be in the, I want to be in the private jet. I want people to see, that's completely selfish, right? It's not humble at all. Yet people are driven for those things. I mean, we're not driven for those things. But you can't tell me that there's not a lot of people that are driven for those things in this world. Heaps of people are. They want more stuff because they like the things of this world. Like he said, Jesus says in John chapter 17, he says, my people, he's praying to the Father, and he says, they, meaning his people, are not of the world, even as I am not of the world. And then he says to the Father, I pray not that you will take them out of the world, but that you'll protect them from the evil. And then he goes on to talk about truth and how God's word is truth. And that's what we're protected by, because we're on that foundation, the rock, the solid rock. And you obviously, you guys would know the famous parable of the wise man builds his house upon the rock. And when the floods come and the winds blew and beat on that house, it didn't fall, right? Because, and those floods that they're talking about in that particular parable and the wind is all the external forces. Mm. It's the fear. It's the financial struggle. It's the peer pressure. It's money, bribery, vanity. All of those things, they won't have an impact on you if you're built on the truth, because to be built on the truth means that I know that I am made in God's image. The Spirit of God dwells within me. I know that God is the true and living God. I know who God is. I know what God's principles are. I know what principles are right. I know that the conscience that I have is actually the light of God within me. When you understand that, it doesn't matter how much the external world tries to push you over. You can't break me. My character, which isn't my body, it's actually my inner being.
Yeah.
You can't collapse me because I've got integrity, because I'm built on the truth. And that's all based off what you hold in your heart, in your core. If I want the things of God, then I'm going to submit my wants, all the wants that are evil and selfish. I'm going to submit those. I'm going to put them to the side. I'm going to go, you know what? I'm going to only go after what God wants me to go after, because I value God more than my own opinion and my own desires. And that's it. To sum up, I think I've gone on a bit of a tangent, but I think it's pretty simple.
And we're back.
Yeah, so I just also want to touch on something else that you both just spoke about, which is this surrender and being of service, because I totally resonate with everything that you said, Nick, and then the surrendering to God. And I know when you talk about that, Dotti, I really resonate with that. But something I do want to touch on here, because again, this is where things get a little bit warped, I feel, in terms of some of the religious programming that we receive. That my belief is that when you are enacting God's will and you're being of service to others, and you're here doing the work that you feel is connecting you to God and what's good for humanity, right? And I feel like I'm on that path with the work that I do. And I often feel like, too, they're often the things that you kind of like if I just wanted to make a lot of money, I definitely could have gone and had a career and moved my way up the ranks and whatever, but there was no heart in it. Like there was no drive there, because it felt empty for me. And the work I'm doing now, I feel much more connected to that purpose of why I was put here, but it's so much harder. It's so much more challenging, but I think that's kind of how God works as well, because again, the things that you receive back, yes, they can be physical. You can be, you can experience abundance in terms of money and things like that, but I believe the gifts that you get are that fulfillment, those non-tangible things that God gives us. But what I want to touch on is this religious programming that you can't experience abundance in terms of the physical. So in terms of material wealth and, a roof over your head and all these things, where there's a lot of religious programming around, well, you've just got to give everything away. You've got to give all your money away, and kind of being poor is what makes you a good person. So where do we kind of draw the line, and how do you guys see that whole thing?
Well, it's interesting because, again, religion, taught poverty was, next to godliness. And, here's the popes and the priests and the cardinals and bishops all, got jewels and gold, and, they're living in palaces, and, they've got a summer home and a winter home, and, they've got real estate all over the world. And yet people just outside the church grounds, they're living in squalor and poverty. And then they teached, you've got to give to the church, otherwise you won't make it to heaven, and all that sort of stuff. Again, this is programming, to keep people in a bowed down position where they are, scratching from day to day, trying to feed their family, all that sort of thing. And it really is slavery and it is bondage. And I don't agree with that at all. I hate it. I've seen it in the Pentecostal movement as well. The pastors are living in their $1 million homes and have their yachts and their Ferraris, and telling people to put their money in the plate and don't worry, God will supply your needs, is such a misrepresentation, and it is an evil teaching as far as I'm concerned. And then single mums can't even pay their rent. In this day and age, this is how they are coerced. So my heart towards that sort of thing is, number one, if you are coerced or manipulated by any means to give funds to any situation where you feel you are manipulated, don't do it. You give because God is asking you to give. This has been led by the Spirit. I believe that we are called to live in abundance. God wants us to have a roof over our head. He wants us to have a nice car. And to me, that's ankle deep blessings, because that's meeting our needs, right? I feel that the abundance is the abundance of the Spirit, the fullness of the presence and power of God. And that supersedes anything that this world has to offer, because part of the programming in the world is you have to have the newest car, you have to have the biggest house, you have to have designer clothes. And again, that's all programming and manipulation, because it feeds insecurity. It is a fear-based momentum. It's a fear-based programming that gets people caught up in the things of this world. Whereas Scripture, it says, we're in the world, but we're not of it. And like my greatest fulfillment in life is talking about God, is sharing His power and His presence. Drawing people out from underneath this system, and I'm calling it religious because it is religious, that keeps everyone bowed down and powerless and limited, when that is not the heart of God towards us. So, God wants to bless us. He wants us to have abundance, because in retrospect, if you are, got your holes in your pants and you live on the street, people aren't going to listen to you. It's just, that is the fact of this world. They won't, they'll look, first appearances. It's like, oh yeah, okay, well, what have you really got to offer? And this is where, again, God is misrepresented as well. And, we've got to start bringing the message of who God really is, not what has already been painted on this earth, where He's angry and He's casting judgment. And, oh my gosh, Nick, you had a bad thought, so He's going to come along with a stick and hit you over the head. Like, we've got to get out of that mindset, because that is not who He is. And I've said it's not who God is to me. So, and, that, how I see God marries up with the Word. It completely is in line with the Word of the Bible. Whereas I feel that the religion takes snippets of it and twists it so that it is, a bondage. It is cruel it is, comes to steal and kill from you. And again, it all sows doubt into the very character of God. That's its whole cycle.
Yeah.
Because people that are struggling, they go, well, where's God in this? Because it's not the God who is the real God, the one true God. It's the God of this world.
Well, a few things. You talked about how religion binds people down. You know what the etymology of the word religion comes from? It comes from the word religere, which means to rebind.
Yeah.
Literally what it means. Re, again, and bind. I did an etymological study on some of these words. And then it's also where you get the word allegiance. It comes from the same word. We get religion. Think of re, again, and legion, of a legion, being part of a legion, like a Roman legion. And think of how the legion is bound down. It's through their oath of allegiance. So when you put all this together, you go, oh, I get what religion really is. It doesn't mean that there isn't good that comes from religion and religious institutions, but the foundation of that idea is that you're rebinding people down to become part of a legion rather than a community of individuals with different gifts. And we read about this in the New Testament, that there's different parts of the body. Some of the hands, some of the feet, some of the brain, some of the eyes. We're all different parts of the body, but we're one church, one community. As for the rest, like there was two other points I wanted to raise, and I actually just wrote them down here. One of them was, you're just about being poor. It's obviously not a virtue, but there is something in being poor that does teach us to be grateful, and it does teach us to, we go through what's called the refining fire. We go through periods of time where, like, I'm very poor at the moment because I've been going through this massive legal battle against the police for crimes that they committed, and they falsified evidence against me. So as a result of that, I've been brought to financial ruin. But I know it's for a righteous purpose, and what it's done is it's taught me how much generosity there is out there. So I've had so many people actually provide money. Like I'm doing an appeal to a really bad decision for costs. I'm trying to get my legal costs back, which are hundreds of thousands of dollars for something I didn't do, which the judge has already said that the police committed the violence against us, committed the offences, falsified the evidence, and ran a malicious prosecution against us. You would think that I would get my costs back, but the judge ruled against me and my co-accused for costs. So now I'm financially, I have nothing. So I put it out there on a couple of different channels. I need some help. If you want to help me, I'm happy to have whatever help you're willing to give. And we've been able to raise more than enough to get this thing started. So it shows me that there is some light that comes out of being put in these tough positions, because it causes you as an individual to not rely on your own capacity, but to rely on God. So I don't have, if I've got all the money, I just go, I can do it. I can take them on, but I don't. So I go, I have to actually rely on God and God's divine providence and provision, because I actually don't have the ability to do any of it.
Thank you for sharing that, because
that's actually been
so spot on. That is exactly some of the stuff we've been brought through and are still going through, but it's like very humble beginnings. And I was going to ask you, Nick, I can't remember if it's Abraham or somebody else. There's a story in the Bible early on where somebody started with nothing as a shepherd, and they asked somebody else, if I can have all your like ugly goats and lambs or whatever, give me all your spotted ones, all the black ones, all the ones you don't want, and I'll take care of those ones. And then from that humble beginning, they created such a massive wealth. They had to literally move lands because they were taking over too much.
Yeah, that was Abraham and Lot, I think. Yeah, and his nephew Lot, and then and Lot ended up taking the better land. But still, Abraham was prosperous.
Well, and what you just shared, Nick, I mean, that still speaks to, like, that is the nature of abundance, like, where it's not your money, like you didn't have to, but you're putting it out to, like, you're kind of giving it up to God and having to go to other people, which a lot of people can't do because of their pride and their ego. And like, that's so hard I think so many people can relate to that, where we can't even ask for help. But there's the abundance in that's what I see. And I think that's a big lesson for people.
So this has been a big lesson not so much to me anymore, because I'm at a point where I just have faith now, and that's the blessing, because faith is a gift from God, and He's given it to me, and I'm very grateful for that gift, because I don't have any fear or worry. But I know my wife's getting there, like, it's because I think she worries a bit more, because she's got to take care of the children. What are we going to do? There was one time recently I needed new tires for my car, because my car was I'd go around a roundabout and I'd slide out. My back wheels I'd just slide out and nearly have a crash. I'm like, okay, I've got to get tires now. We have no money. You know what I'll do? I'll just drive to the tire shop.
That's right.
And I will go, and I don't have the money. The money will turn up. I literally had that mindset. And my wife's in the car with me. She says, but there's no money. How are we going to get tires? I said, just trust in God. Take Him at His word. He's going to provide for us. He's not going to have us driving around in a car like this. Literally, as I was driving there, I was nearly at the I was probably about halfway, maybe a bit over halfway to into Dandenong, which is a suburb where we get our tires replaced. And the money turned up a little bit over what we needed for the to get our tires. It was money that was owed to me that I had forgotten about, and it just turned up. It was right there. There Amazing. It was. There was, and I'll give you another example. This happens to me all the time. Like we had no car, right? No car, and then and we had 4 children at the time. We've got 5 now. We needed at least 6 seats. The next door neighbour says, "Oh, you need a car? I've got an 8-seater car, and you can have it. And hey, I'll even pay the rego for you." Like stuff like this happens all the time. There was a mate of mine. He needed money. He was a guy working on my court case with me. He's a really good friend of mine, but he's been evicted from his house. He said, "I really need help, Nick. I know you don't have much money, but I really need some help." I said, "Actually, I'm doing all right at the moment. I've got probably about $1,000 there that I can give you." So I literally just said, I'll give you that, because I know he needed it. And literally in the same moment, I get a text message from a guy who saw me on the news about my case. And he said, "Oh, mate, I wanted to help you out. I reckon I've got about $1,000. So literally in that same moment. So it's things like that show you God's all over it. He's got lots of resources to draw upon. But the other point I wanted to raise, and this is probably about purpose, right? So in this world, you're persecuted for the truth. Part of the truth is your purpose. You have a purpose in truth. So if you go on the path of fulfilling your purpose, exactly what God designed you to be, you're going to be persecuted. And some of that's going to be, you might be, brought to financial ruin. That might be part of the persecution. This is, I think, the enemy's way of getting you off course, making an accusation against you and saying to God, "Hey, God, Alexa and Isaac, they've got this purpose, but if we bring them to financial ruin, and you let me bring them to financial ruin, they're not going to go. They're not going to continue on. They're going to go and find a career job and get out of poverty." But what you've got to do is have the perseverance and the faith to rely on God. And then once you get past that point where that accusation no longer has any merit, God will then bless you. You've just got to go through those trying experiences. And that's what we call the refiner's fire. It's all through the Bible. We're going through the refiner's fire. You go through a process that's very hard. And that hard process, sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's emotional. It could be all sorts of things. It could be both. But going through that process refines your character, and it teaches you how to rely on God and how to be grateful for what you have. So when you don't have a lot of things, you actually rely on God more, and you reach out to God more, and you value the things of God more. And then you look at the things that you do have, and you think, well, you know what? I've got good health. I've got children that are happy. And you spend more time focusing on those things. But when you've got lots of stuff, I find it's just a big distraction. When I've had lots of money, I've been preoccupied with doing fun things. I haven't been drawing closer to God. But now if I was to accumulate wealth, I don't have a desire just to do fun things. But that's only because I've gone through that refining process, to which now if I was to receive wealth, I would have something righteous and purposeful and meaningful to do with it. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having wealth, but I think when you have wealth without that purpose, it's very destructive. And all it does is it distracts from your actual purpose. Like if you were to inherit a castle and $1 billion in the bank and all the rest of it, very unlikely that you're going to go on a journey to pursue God and go through those tough times and the persecution that will come from that, because you could go to your comfy safe castle and stay there and have parties with all your money and fly on your private jet. So there is something in this idea of poverty, but we're not meant to be just, it's not really poverty. And we see this also in the 40 years in the wilderness. They weren't made rich there, right? They were originally. They actually were given a whole lot. Then they made a golden calf out of the gold. But then they were fed each day exactly what they needed. They didn't have extra, just enough. God fed them all the way through. And then, so they could have a rest on the Sabbath day, the day before, God would give them a double amount of food that would come from the sky, right? So God provides exactly what you need. Then you see people like Elijah. Elijah's fed by ravens. Ravens come and bring food to him because there's people that want to kill him. God says, go out to the wilderness, hide there for a while until this all blows over. He doesn't have any food, but God provides it for him. So the idea that we need to be, that we should be rich and wealthy, I don't think there's any real merit to it. I think what it is we just need to be on purpose. And when we're on purpose, we're going to go through a process so that we can fulfill that purpose, which oftentimes I think will bring us to financial ruin. But that's so that we develop the internal characteristics that we need to be able to become righteous and decent and have integrity. And then once we have that, then I think God can give you more abundance, because he knows that you value the right things.
Yeah, it's like my mom always told us growing up, God's arm is not short. And I like that. Yeah, that's definitely a testimony to that.
Yeah, and
I want to get into...
Just before we dive into that, I just want to say that resonates so deeply, because we've both experienced that, especially in the last 2 years, like Isaac coming over and relaunching the business and whatever, that like we were living week to week. And at those points where we're like, we don't have any money, like we didn't know where the next, paycheck was coming from, so to speak. And we've had so many experiences of that where money would just show up, or people would give us eggs from their chickens or fruit from their trees. And and that for me has been such a huge expansion into abundance, because it's not about like, oh, I've got like millions of dollars and thousands of dollars in the bank. It's like, no, God always provides, and it builds that strength in that faith. So totally with you on that, Nick.
It's a promise that God makes. He says, it's actually Jesus. He says, take no thought for your life, what you should eat, what you should drink, or what you should be clothed with, for your Father in heaven already knows you have need of these things. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. So this is the qualifier, and all these things will be added to you. So if you're just seeking God and you're on purpose, you don't have to worry about any of it. And there's no point even giving any thought to worry or anxiety, because God's made a promise that if you're seeking me, I'll take care of all of the stuff you need. Your clothing, your food, your house, everything that you need, I'll provide it. Yeah. But I want you to go on this other path where you seek me. And if you do that, you have to have faith, because the world will tell you that, no, you have to have a good job. You've got to have a good career. You've got to make the money. You won't be able to survive. That's what the world teaches you. But faith will teach you that, no, God, there's a God who will actually provide everything for you, even in a way that you might not understand. And that's what's going to be the most meaningful path you can take. Because when you take a path with God and with faith, amazing things happen. But if you go the other way, seeking money and wealth, amazing things don't happen. It's mundane. What an empty life it is to just have to work really hard, work in the grind, working in a cubicle for somebody else, just to make enough to maybe have a house one day. And then you when you retire and you're old now and you actually don't have much to give to God anymore, because you spent it all that energy and effort fulfilling somebody else's purpose and meaning, but not your own. I mean, that's empty and it's very shallow and sad.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, before we move on, what do you have to say on that, Dotti?
No, I totally agree. And that's part of the system that we're locked under. But I also find that, again, God works to who you are, your individual, DNA, how your character, so some people need to go more through that journey that Nick has shared. Others don't have to go through it as deeply as that. It's always about the response of the heart. I mean, look, I've always put God first, and I have walked away from, $1 million home and money and all that sort of stuff, but I never regret it because it was always about fulfilling what God, his heart is on my life. And I'll stay true to that because that's where I find my fulfillment. It's like that's where I feel alive. And just in knowing that I'm doing what he's asked me to do. I mean, I went through it when I did the floods, and the government came after me and closed our bank accounts, and I had to stand in who I was in God and the truth that I had done nothing wrong, even though they were trying to fear push me into, you're going to jail. And I'm like, what? Like that, I couldn't comprehend it. And how dare you show up all the other charities that are government run? For a split second,
Dotti,
I went
how dare
into,
you raise
oh my
money
gosh,
for flood victims
what have I done?
without the government's
To then go,
approval?
hang on a minute.
Ridiculous.
God, have I done anything wrong? He says, you have done nothing wrong. And that was it.
Yeah.
I stood solid in that. And every time they interrogated me for 4 hours, 4 of them, twice, they were trying to get me to hang myself with my words. They were trying to manipulate. And I was going, no, I've done nothing. I'm going, you're punishing me from helping people. Like, this doesn't even make sense.
Wow.
And God had pre-warned me to keep very good records of every cent that we had and where it went to. So when they went through the book that was this big and every receipt, they couldn't, they said not 1 cent has been misappropriated. Yet I went through 2 years of scrutiny for them to close the book and go, oh, well, we're going to find you because you didn't have a license in Queensland, a $24 license, right? But if I didn't know who I was, guys, I would have been undone.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would have had a breakdown.
Oh, how ridiculous.
That's right.
Yeah.
This is the evil of government, though. This is why when you think about it, they use taxpayer funds to prosecute you for 2 years because you didn't file a $24 license with the government to raise funds selflessly for others who are in need.
Yeah.
Right? Think of the crazy.
Yeah.
That's the government. We shouldn't even have them. I don't think. Like the way they operate now, the government literally sets up businesses in direct competition with the little guy anyway. So they're not preserving our way of life. They're making it harder, and they're creating a monopoly of everything.
Yeah, that's why it's so
So
important.
that we can't thrive
It's so
anymore.
important for us to learn to govern ourselves, because you're going to have government of some kind. It's just, are you abdicating your self-responsibility to this corrupt group of individuals, or are you looking to where that authority actually comes from, God, and acting it out in your life with
And because
honor
the
and with
world
good
is upside
integrity?
down,
And if you take
like
responsibility
it's the
for that,
corporations that
you
run
can
the
let go
government.
of them. You can basically say,
That's the problem.
You're fired.
So
take a leaf out of Donald
and the
Trump's
government
book.
is a corporation.
You're fired.
So if we come back
move
into
about our
right
business.
alignment where God is in control, he gives us authority and dominion. We then tell the government, the people representing that we've put in position, what we want, and then they tell the corporations what the rules and regulations are. But we're completely upside down. And this is something that we've got to start reversing, number one, in our life, but in the world, globally, spiritually. We've got to turn this upside down.
Yeah, totally. And this is a perfect segue into getting into how evil came into this world. So we're going to go...
So I want to preface this with why this stuff is important, because I know Dottie's brought up some really interesting and a bit contrarian to what the normal, quote unquote, accepted belief on some things are. with Adam and Eve, and where some of these things have been taught and repeated throughout history. But why this matters for me is I believe that we're in a spiritual war. We can see that with everything that's been going on, with the deception and lies and the harm that's been done willingly and knowingly by positions of power in this world and the realm, and the evil that we've seen at high places and these principalities that we're against. And it's all throughout Scripture. But what's important to note is, from an earthly perspective, because we're earthlings, we're born here, there are people that have lots of experience in battle. And I believe there's a fractal truth for physical fighting, like combat tactics, the stuff that I immersed myself in for years. And one of the places where a lot of that knowledge is condensed is in Sun Tzu, The Art of War. And one particular place that everybody knows and quotes all the time is you need to know yourself and know your enemy. If you know yourself but not your enemy, you can win about half the battles. If you don't know yourself or your enemy, you'll lose every battle. But if you know yourself and your enemy, then you need not fear the outcome of any battle. And I've been thinking and learning about the enemy since I was in grade school, and actively just looking at this stuff, almost like practicing. That's what drove me into joining the military, trying out for special forces, and going back again and getting selected and going into this combat warrior lifestyle. Was I want to know what battle is. I want to know how to manage and mitigate extreme danger and risk so that I can go back and be a better, guardian and protector in my family and my community. And as Christians, we're or if you don't call yourself a Christian, but just the people that follow God, the people with a heart, like we talked about, after truth. If you ignore the battle that we're in with the risks and dangers that are there, you're not going to be a very good guardian or protector in your family or your community. And evil is going to continue to run everything into the ground and push us off of cliffs and put us in prison and all sort of stuff. So we need to be able to stand our ground. But to do that, we need to have a strategy. And to do the strategy, you really need to dig into what's the situation, situational awareness. So with that, getting into where evil entered the world and why. And I guess we could start with Adam and Eve, although I think it goes back before that. But Dotti, you had some interesting conversation. I don't think I was there for that, with some different insights about Adam and Eve. And do you want to give us kind of the skinny on that?
Well, like I said to you guys, is there anything to prove this theory? There's some aspects to it that I go, you know what, that's quite feasible. And I think it's a mystery that it still needs to be unpacked. But before I go there, I want to say this. If we take the fullness of what Jesus represents, right, this enemy is already defeated. So if we come from that mindset that he is a defeated foe that is basically roaming the earth using fear and chaos to cause people to go, oh, we don't know who we are, and we don't know who God is where, that's the shift that needs to happen. So that is always where I come from. This is a defeated foe, and scripturally it says that when he is revealed who it is, we will all go, what, that thing? Like, what is that? So always keep that in your forefront, so to speak. As far as what happened in the garden, well, when I had my first child, I was like, when I meet Eve, I'm going to punch her in the face because childbirth is not pleasant. And it was hard work and it was painful, even though the joy of the child supersedes all of that. But I was like, how dumb are you, woman, that you're the cause of all of this, right? I'm just putting that on the table. So, but then there's this, concept coming around because we've heard about the Nephilims. you know, and to me, they make sense because my mindset is, how could anybody treat another person the way that a lot of people treat people? You know, that narcissistic,
Yeah.
you know, with cruelty, with no ability of humanity, you know, to traffic children and to sacrifice children and to, you know, traffic women and, you know, traffic men. Like I can't conceive that. My brain just is not able to comprehend how someone could do that to someone else. You know, the torturing and the killing. It's like, I just, it's so foreign to me, guys. Well, the Nephilim were, according to
And for anyone
not
like me,
Enoch,
sorry, just to clarify, that's not super well versed on this stuff. Just explain the Nephilim, just a quick overview of what that is.
There's a couple of verses, but particularly there's a scripture that there's a Bible verse, it's a Bible book that's not even in there. But thank you. I went blank for a minute.
It's in Jude. It's in Genesis chapter 6 as well.
Like he talks about the Nephilim, which are the fallen angels. And the fallen angels then saw how beautiful the women were of humanity and had children with them. Right? Now, people say that they desired them because they were so beautiful. I don't see it like that. I see it as a you know, a planned infiltration that we are going to corrupt the DNA of humanity. That's how I see it. And that's why we have the, you know, the land of the giants and all the distortions and things like that. And there's proof coming out more and more that they did exist. It's not a, you know, a pie in the sky theory. But going back to Adam and Eve, it was like when you read scripture, it's going, here's Adam and Eve, they're together. And then the serpent comes along and he's talking to Eve, right? Well, Adam was there too. So what has been presented is that the Lucifer, the snake, whatever you want to call him, actually had intercourse with Eve, but so did Adam. So they conceived both Cain and Abel. So Cain was the seed of Lucifer and Abel was the seed of Adam. And this is where there's been this, you know, Cain despised Abel, and the word Cain, cannibalism, like it's, you know, you can put all these words together. I think it's a possible theory, but then through Cain, we have this Luciferian DNA that then rules onto the earth, right?
Yeah.
Just a theory, which to me explains that DNA that type of vein of cruelty and corruption that has come through. So there's a thought.
Well, it makes sense just even in the context of like the Freemasonry bloodlines, right? Because they're very, you know, they like to keep everything in the bloodline and all of that. Like we know this stuff. So that's an interesting perspective on that too.
Well, if you look at it, there's three passages. Well, there's two passages in the Bible. You got Genesis chapter 6, which talks about the Nephilim. Nephilim means the fallen ones, because the I am, the im, Nephilim, it means it's plural. It's like putting an S on the end. Nephal means to fall. It's the Hebrew word to fall. It's the fallen ones. Then it talks about the giants that came. And then we have Jude, which talks about the angels who left their first estate. They were in the host of heaven. They were up higher and they left it. Then you've got the book of the Watchers and the book of Enoch, which talks about how the angels came upon Mount Hermon, which is the place of an oath, and there was 200 of them, and they made an oath of mutual imprecations, where basically if I go down, you go down. I'm going to be destroyed for this. So we have to do all this together and we bind ourselves down. Now, think of the Freemasonry and secret societies. What do? They make oaths of mutual imprecations. That sort of shows the inception of this ideology, this idea. But this was after the Garden of Eden when those 200 fell. That was after, because we know it's during Enoch's time, so that's later. And there would be, like, if you look at like the Greek gods all descended upon Mount Olympus, so it's the same pattern. The Bible itself actually mentions a number of Greek gods. It talks about Apollo, mentions Apollo, which is one of the Greek gods, but it actually calls Apollo the angel of the bottomless pit. It also mentions death and hell as people, and says I think it's in Revelation 20 or 21. It says that they'll be cast into the bottomless pit, or it's into the lake of fire. It's one of those. Anyway, but it mentions death and hell, and if you look at the Greek words there, it's Thanatos, right, for death, which is the angel of death, and hell is Hades, right? So they're actually using the names of these beings in the original text, but we've lost that when we read it through the through the English, Latin and English translation. But it's right there. If you look at the original language, that these beings are there. The Bible confirms it, that these angels are real, and it talks about a war in heaven in Revelation chapter 12. It says there's a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon with Michael, and they had this battle. And obviously Michael, who is like God, right? That's the archangel, one of the powerful angels. He was able to prevail over Satan and his angels. And then they end up coming down here. And here they are. And this is where the battle's still continuing. And why is it continuing here? Well, because we're the temple of God. The kingdom of God's within us. The Spirit of God's within us. We're made in God's image. So what's Satan going after? He's going after us. Think of it like real estate. What's the real estate he wants to get control of? He wants to get control of us. And that's where the battlefield is. It's not out there. It's not a war over here or a war over there. It's actually a war within the individuals. And once we realize that, we can start to actually win the war ourselves individually. And then when we win the war and we can purge out all the destructive forces that have control over our being, we then will start to bear the fruit by doing the things that God would have us do, and that will inspire others, and then others will then become inspired and converted, and then they'll be able to overcome, and then we can build up an army of resistance and be able to function according to our purpose.
Yeah, I just want to back up what Dotti was saying. So I don't know if y'all heard about this guy Zen Garcia in the States. Him and Rob Skiba. Rob Skiba passed away during COVID.
Oh, I know Rob Skiba. Yeah.
Yeah. So I met both those guys in Dallas at this convention, and Zen is very interesting. He's handicapped. He's in a wheelchair, and pretty much just spends most of his time reading and researching and going deep like this, just on a whole nother level. But he's got this great collection of books that are extra biblical books. There's the Book of Enoch, of course. Rob Skiba's published.
What's his name?
Zen Garcia. Yeah, if you look him up, you'll find him. They've got a website, and they've got these books you can actually buy, and him and his son and his daughter-in-law are I believe still doing their thing. The thing, there's a conversation that him and Rob Skiba had about the words, and I don't remember the exact word, but in English, in a couple translations, it says, "In the garden, the serpent beguiled Eve," and in Hebrew and potentially the Greek, if there's a Greek word, but it was like seduction was the connotation. It wasn't the exact word for seduction, but it was this connotation of wasn't just like tricking her, in a Loki kind of fashion. It was like seducing. And you can kind of see that. I mean, if you just look back and look objectively at the story of Cain and Abel, it makes zero sense for a brother to kill his own brother over something. Ridiculous or like something that you can change. It's like, I'm not.
Sorry, what's the story of Cain and Abel? Like, why did he kill his brother?
Well, one of y'all want to take it. Yeah.
So, Cain wanted to, he wasn't giving an offering to God. He was just grabbing like whatever bit of fruit and going, here you go, God, that's my offering to you. And Abel was doing an honorable offering according to what God wanted him to offer up. And he was being blessed for doing the right thing. And Cain was jealous of it
so
and
there's
angry.
that jealousy.
He wanted to do it his way. And then
a little bit more than that.
Yeah.
Cain actually was ploughing the ground and growing fruits and vegetables and things like that. So he labored really hard to do this, to produce something to then offer it to God. Whereas Abel went and grabbed a sheep or a goat that he didn't have to do anything for. He basically walked into the paddock and picked up and offered it, and God was well pleased with that sacrifice.
And the reason the sacrifice is so important, and because if we're going to talk about sacrifice, we should explain it so that you understand, because I didn't want to go there, but the idea of sacrifice, because it was always a foreign idea, like, why do you have to kill something to sacrifice to God? It makes no sense. But what it does is it shows you that in this world, to get out, basically to please God, innocent blood has to die. Not to please God, to satisfy the demands of justice because of what happened in the garden. So there is this, and which is what Jesus did. He was innocent, right? That's what they call him, the Lamb of God, right? And then you've got these Israelites all this time sacrificing a lamb, and it had to be a young lamb. And it's interesting because a young lamb is one of the only creatures that you can literally walk to its death, and it knows it's going to die. It can see other animals being killed, and it will still go even though it knows it's going to die. So it's all imprinted in everything that all the way through, even the way the animal functions, and even the culture and everything that existed anciently. But this was set early on to show us that innocence is going to have to die to redeem you. And that was the whole reason for a sacrifice, what they call a blood sacrifice, which I think is very foreign to us now, because we sort of think about that and think, oh, that sounds gross. Like, why would you do that? But there is a reason for it. And it is because in order for us to be able to be redeemed back to God, innocence had to die. And that was what Christ did. But anyway, I just wanted to go into that, because if we talk about this with the sacrificing of an animal, and you've got people on the channel thinking, oh, that's really weird. Why would God be pleased with that?
It's still a sticky one, because it's
I was
like,
going to say, because it's very
Yeah.
satanic as well. They do the blood sacrifices in their rituals.
And they sacrifice innocence as well with children and all of that.
Yeah, they do it the other way around. So what they do is they it's not an innocent sacrifice. They sacrifice innocence, and they try to consume it.
In order to gain power.
Blood, and they do all these sick things to take the life out of it. It's very, very, it's the complete opposite.
What do you got on this, Dotti?
Didn't mean to open a can of worms there, guys. I was just going back to the attitude of Cain, like he got jealous, and therefore jealousy often leads to murder. But as far as the occult doing their sacrificing, you see, it's all about the blood. So, and whereas we don't have to do that, because this is what Jesus fulfilled that law, right? When he died on the cross, and he was innocent blood, an innocent person. But, the Luciferians are wanting to connect with the human blood, because we have the DNA of God in it. So this is why they sacrifice as well. And the fact that they're trying to enter realms of the spirit illegally, like through the back door. Whereas once we've accepted God, we can step into it freely. So this is the parallel lines that are going on as well. And that's why, again, religion teaches the works orientation. And then the occult takes it to, you offering up your life, okay? And that's why they go after the adrenochrome and all the things that they do. And it's quite morbid as well, and sadistic. And that's why that's so foreign to most of us, because it's not in our DNA, because we've got God DNA.
Well, and aren't there a lot of other stories like that in the Bible that are quite like that, where you're just like, whoa, they were doing stuff like this?
Loads of them. Yeah. So the idea is obviously that one side wants you to sacrifice to kill the innocent and to do all sorts of rituals to destroy your conscience. I believe that's why even politically in the world, and I think in the elite circles they do these things, because Satan's there and he thinks, hey, hey, Joe Blow, I see you there coming to our meetings, coming to our parties, in our circles, and I see that you want to go higher up in this world. The only issue is there's this little thing inside of you called a conscience. It's the light of God. We just have to do something about that. But don't worry. We've booked you a ticket to go to a little island in the Caribbean, and you're going to meet our mate Jeffrey Epstein, and he's going to take you through a whole series of our rituals, and there won't be any issue with that light in you anymore. It won't be an issue. And I think that's why they do it. I don't think it's because they particularly like maybe doing these things, but they're willing to sacrifice the light with it. I mean, I'm sure there are people that do like doing those things, but I think a lot of these people that get into these circles, they want the wealth and the power, and they want the jobs, and they want these things so much that they're willing to make these satanic contracts where they have to engage in these satanic rituals where they basically destroy their own conscience through their own decision making, and then the enemy can trust them that they're not going to turn. They're going to continue to toe the line all the way through. I think that's all it is.
It follows that principle of inversion. That's what makes, I was listening to Owen Benjamin recently. He's got a really interesting breakdown of this, is it Pink Floyd's album, The Wall? And really, really fascinating, talking about history of war and bloodshed and all this stuff, and then the masculine and feminine. And at what point does a peaceful man leave his family and go to join the war, and like what precipitates after that once he's dead, and the feminine and the child are left vulnerable. And you can see this inversion of truth, and that's where the evil shows itself every time. Yeah. And so I'm following that as kind of like a framework that's reliable, and I'm looking for that with the bloodshed of an innocent lamb, because that was essentially the first death. When you read the Bible, was when Adam and Eve knew they were naked. God killed an animal, gave them their skin, or the skin, to cover themselves, to cover their nakedness. And
it's interesting that the tree only had two fruit, one good, one evil.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he did warn them.
The whole idea of
and he did warn them. He's like, don't eat of this tree. Like, don't go there. You're gonna die.
Yeah. That just shows you there's that you wouldn't have been able to have decision making. Like, you wouldn't have had this sovereignty over over choice if you weren't given choices, right? So that was it. That's the free gift that was given there.
So the whole story of Adam and Eve, because again, it was one of those stories that never really sat with me, where I was just like, oh yeah, that sounds like, I don't know. There was just always something about it that felt a little incomplete. So I love hearing these different perspectives and potentially different versions of the story. Because for me, the thing that I've always come back to is that if Adam and Eve were put on earth, and earth as we know it is this realm of duality, because if we're to be here in this realm of oneness, and I believe that's where we come from, and I believe as humans we come here to have this experience so that we can experience something other than oneness, this universal love and God, and we have this realm of polarity. And I think that's what the story of Adam and Eve really tells, is that there's the good and the evil, and there's your free will, and you have to choose. And I think the story just shows that when you choose evil, these are the repercussions, kind of thing.
Well, here's a thought. True love, it says, greater love have no man than this, that a man will lay down his life for his friends, which is what Christ did. Christ spoke those words. And if there was no evil, how would there be that expression of love in that way, right? So I think the presence of evil exists potentially for the purposes of expressing love, to show the power and the value of it, so that you have this opposing force or this opposing element to go, here's one side of the spectrum, and then you can see the other side because of that. If everything's the same and it's all linear, well, everything's the same. If every day is a sunny day, what's a sunny day, right? You've got to experience that opposite.
Exactly. It's like the
But you
whole
were talking
shadow and
about-
light thing too. I just wanted to say, like with the light casts the shadow, and you
exactly.
can't have one without the other.
Yeah, and you see which one's more powerful, isn't it? The light, the darkness never overpowers light, ever. Can't, right? So we're shown that in the makeup of this world. It shows you that, and we know what the light is because all through the Bible it tells us, especially in the New Testament, the truth is the light, right? That, you know, and Jesus says he is the light. You know, so we've got this all the way through, expressing this idea that the light, which we know is more powerful than the darkness, and we know the enemy is all things dark. There's a really good Bible verse getting back to the original, I think, question about knowing. You said knowing yourself and knowing your enemy. Well, there's two verses I thought of. You know, one of them is be wise as serpents and harmless as doves, which means to be wise to the serpent, who is Satan, who is the god of this world. Right? We know that that's who Satan is. It's the same guy because it says in Revelation 12, it says, and that old serpent called Satan, and then it calls him the devil. It's the same guy, right? So we know that. So we be wise to his stuff. Like we understand what he does, but we don't do those things. And then to know, I think it's in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16, it says, know ye not that you are the temple of God and the Spirit of God dwells within you. So he's asking the question, no, you're not. Do you not know that you are, this is what you are? So once we know that that's what we are, we know ourselves, we're the temple of God, so we have something divine about us. That's very valuable. Because to think that it's not that important, not that valuable, is literally blasphemous to God. That's putting God down. If you have anything that's part of you that's attributed to God, then you have great value. So that's who we are. And then we know who the enemy is. And if we understand this war, she talked about the spiritual war that's going on, and it is a spiritual war. It's a war between two variables, truth and lies. So Satan's called the father of lies. Everything in this world is a lie that exists, that's part of this world. All the false narratives, all the strongholds of power, they're all built up on a lie. And that's why we see restriction on speech, restriction of talking about certain things on social media platforms. That's why we see legislation to criminalize certain speech, because if you speak the truth, you destroy the lies. And the lies are where the enemy gets their power from. And you could say the governments get their power from the lies, but the governments are underneath and subordinate to the to Satan, who's at the top of the upside down world. So that's why that's the battle that's going on. It's the truth versus the lies. And when you live according to the truth, you'll be persecuted and hated because the people of this world love the lie, and they believe the lie, and they believe that it's virtuous and it's right. And we saw that through COVID. You know, you got to put your mask on. Got to put your mask on. You got to get your jab. You're putting people at risk. Like they went for the lie, but the lie broke down, didn't it? It broke down. Where the truth was always the truth. It hasn't changed, and that's the war that's going on. And I think that's what Satan's trying to do. He's trying to take over this whole realm with lying, because God doesn't lie. So, and God can't lie. So if God can't lie, then that means Satan has a special power that God doesn't have. But similarly, Satan can't he's not of the truth. He can't speak the truth. He's a liar. Everything he does is a lie. So it's whether or not he's going to be able to accumulate enough power to take over everything with his lies, or whether the truth of God, or the truth that is God, is going to be more powerful. And we already know who's won, but a lot of people don't know that. And I think Satan's just doesn't, he knows he's lost, but he's just straining at a gnat, trying to find something. Somehow I can get something, but there's nothing he can do. So it's completely deluded, and he's completely deranged.
I'll point out that that's part of the reason why we're, I think, cosmically here talking about this from a biblical worldview, and why it's so potent and important versus Buddhism or Hinduism or these other religions. None of these other religions really address this problem in this way, or at all. In Buddhism, there really is no situational awareness about the nature of evil and how to combat it. Same
well,
thing.
and I'll just say that's the modern day Buddhism that we know, that's most commonly known now, because I heard something or was reading something recently that actually said the original Buddhist teachings, which are very hard to find now, actually did talk about the duality of good and evil, but what we know of Buddhism now is that it's all this love and light, and it's very new age. But anyway, continue.
Yeah, and the same thing. I mean, there is whispers of it. So you have the destroyer in Hinduism, and you have some really interesting knowledge about demons and Satan, al-Satan, and all that out of the Muslim teachings. But I think for me, the worldview that just rings the most truth and has this, it was like a clear as a bell when you look at it throughout time, when the Book of Enoch came into the picture. And then when I read some things through like the Book of Jasher and Jubilees, it's a history of the world, the seen and the unseen. And we're told by Jesus, I forget where, but he said, I'll never forget this, but he said, we should basically act as though the unseen is more valuable or more important than the seen. And I see that as another framework of truth that's just written throughout creation and through the spirit, the process of spiritual awakening is when you realize, the lie. It's almost like the physical world itself has a deceptive nature to it. And not that God created it that way, but I think it's part of that spiritual manipulation.
It is, yeah. Like when the fall happened, the world changed. Everything changed because the enemy got his influential power. He doesn't have the power to over our decision making, but the power to influence our decision making for sure.
Yeah.
Can't force us. I mean, we've got the final say on what we choose to do and believe, but ultimately we can be pressured into making decisions, which is like we saw with COVID and other narratives that exist in the world.
Yeah, totally. Dot, what were I'd love to hear your thoughts on what I was saying about Adam and Eve, because you kind of went like in terms of like the duality and just the story that just only because I do say that because I don't fully believe that. Because again, this narrative in certain Christian religions that says that we're born in sin and whatever is because of the Adam and Eve story, because Adam took the apple and that's the reason that we're now born sinners, because we all came from Adam and Eve. But I just don't believe that, because again, it comes back to but God made us in His image, and obviously because then the story of Jesus came and all of that and how he died for our sins. And yeah, that's just my perspective on it. So what are your thoughts on that, Dot?
Well, I feel the church has just used that, we're born in original sin and then we have to be baptized, because if we're not baptized, the child's going to go to hell, it won't make it to heaven. And again, that they're all spiritual contracts that we are then contracting again with Lucifer. We're offering our child up almost like to Moloch and going, well, I consent to, the church having control over this child. And again, these are all the false baptisms and the false rituals that we have been programmed to engage with that are spiritual contracts. So again, let me go back to, the contract that Jesus made on our behalf is that He died to save the world. So the world is already saved. It just hasn't stepped into that knowledge yet. It is people that are rejecting that concept or, doing life their own way. That is the offer again on the table, but it's up to them, because God, He didn't want us to be zombies that were yes, sir, no, sir. He wanted us to have free will. That's where you have, the good and the evil. We choose what we want to be. We choose to be good or we choose to be evil. So, to me, it's like, again, evangelicals, Pentecostals, they're all unbelievers. And it's like, no, because they have belief.
Yeah.
The problem is they're pre-believers. They haven't come into the awakening or the enlightening or, you know, coming into that relationship with God that they are all able to have. Doesn't matter what their background is, but it comes to choice. And that's why, like, God wants to partner with us, but we can choose that if we want to or not. Nick could still go become, you know, a prime fighter. God will still be with him in it, but it won't produce the fruits of the fullness of what God is actually wanting to do with Nick. It does, just because Nick goes that way, God goes, oh, that's it. I'm not having anything to do with Nick. He's not doing what I want him to do. That's not how God works. He is not a dictator. It is always comes to free will. And this is where, you know, the law was fulfilled. The law was fulfilled when Jesus died on the cross. And that's why we come out of the law and into a covenant, which Nick touched on earlier. A covenant is completely different. It is God will always say and do what he says he's going to do, regardless of what we do or don't do. That's what a covenant is. A contract is you have to do this end of the deal and then I'll do that end of the deal. If you don't do your end of the deal, that breaks the contract. Right? That's the agreement. And that is the difference. So it takes us out of works. It takes us out of this sense of, you know, I'm a sinner and I'm never good enough and, you know, I'm never going to make it. All that downward chaos and bondage is, we can step out of that. Each and every one of it. We can just choose to step out of it right now. So it's the choice, and it's a free choice. It's a free will. And, you know, when you partner with God and your heart is, God, I just want to be with you. I just want to do what you're asking me to do, because I find life to be fun when I'm doing it. Life is worth living when I'm walking with God in that way, because the fruits of it is always life. It's always, you know, truth. It's always connecting with people that are really on the same page, really have the same heart. So to me, I wouldn't want to live life any other way, guys. And you know, that's the choice for everyone on this earth, everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm totally with you on that.
John chapter 4 says it best. It says, the time is coming and now is when the true worshippers will worship in spirit and in truth. For God seeks such. and then it says, God is a spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth, which is different to worshiping in just like fear or just in ritual or in obedience, which is like how you would worship a government or a king. Yes, I've got to do what the king says, right? This is going to be within where I actually want to. I want to, because God is great. God is reliable. God is honest. God is always gives me what I need and cares about me. That's, and God actually sent his beloved son to literally pay the price that I couldn't pay, and went through the most amazing sacrifice and suffering for me, only because he's full of love and has the capacity to do so. The enemy doesn't have the ability to do that.
Yeah. It's a great place to end it. And I feel like we could honestly talk, we could do another 3 hours on this. So we might actually have to do it again, because there's so many other things I would have loved to have gotten into. But I think that is such a beautiful place to leave it, because, I love that's always your message, Dot, is that this is available to everyone. And I love that you also, because that's my big belief, is that, like you said, God is with us whether we know it or not. And, I see that now, having gone through half my life not knowing who or what God was, but knowing that, he was always with me. I just didn't, I kind of liken it to the analogy of walking through a tunnel. I'm in the tunnel and I can't see God. I don't know. that he's there, but he's walking alongside and he's with me the whole way. But it's when you get to the end, and like you say, you can choose to walk out of that tunnel at any time and he'll be there waiting for you. I'm a big believer in that. And so really, yeah, that's the message for people, for anyone that is questioning, you know, whether it's questioning God as a whole, or whether it's questioning, you know, certain teachings in certain, you know, religions or spiritual philosophies. I think that's what it comes down to, is having that connection with God first and foremost. So thank you both so much for being with us.
It's been a great chat.
An awesome chat. And again, you'll both be at the Living Free Festival, which we're going to see you guys there too. So we'll have that all linked in the show notes for people to get tickets. And you'll both be speaking. And yeah, any final messages before we leave?
I would just say that, you know, there's a lot of religions out there and different ideas, but this is my understanding of how it all works. God wants our heart. It has to be freely given. He's not going to force you with a sword to convert to his way of thinking. That's not how he operates. He actually wants you to willingly love who he is, because he's an amazing God, and he should be loved because he loves us. And if we really want to make sense of all the crazy things that are happening in the world, you can't make sense of it without understanding that there is a spiritual war between Satan and God. And when you start to apply, that aspect to the equation, things start to make a lot more sense. And then when you have that truth and that understanding, you become a lot freer, especially in your decision making, because you start to make decisions that are correct, and they're going to draw you closer to God. And then you're going to start to become empowered and have true courage and true confidence, the things that they don't want you to have. So, you know, don't buy into the fear and believe the lies. Focus on the truth and have faith in God. And that's how we overcome all the challenges that we're going to face, because there are many, and it's not going to be easy, and it's not meant to be easy, but it's going to be well worth it in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. Praise the Lord.
Amen.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for tuning in to the Natural AF podcast, where we explore holistic healing modalities, mindsets, and methods that reconnect us to nature and our natural state of being.
If something resonated, share this episode and see the show notes for our guest links, as well as all of our discount codes for our aligned affiliates and Natural Art Form, where we handcraft a range of organic, natural remedies to help support your body's natural healing abilities and help support the show.
If you're listening on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, please take a few seconds to leave us a rating and review. And if you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, hit the like button and drop us a comment, and be sure to subscribe to our channel for the latest updates.
We're not here to conform, we're here to remember what's real. So step into your power, be curious, and be natural AF.